Those are the things we're trying to address tonight. As part of the application process, city staff has reviewed the location. We found a few items that need to be brought up to code. The applicant is here and can speak to that, but has said that she is willing to make those changes. The site in its entirety has about 37 parking spaces. Our code requires one parking space per two occupants. So at 37 spaces, the total occupant load would be approximately 70 people. The additional spaces would be for staff. The city staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit as long as the letter that you have attached there, all those items are corrected. The permit would be reviewed in 1 year to make sure the items have been corrected. And the occupant load based on the zoning restrictions would be limited to 70 people. And as I said, the applicant is here if you have any questions for her.
Does that include the occupant load? Does that include a porch and a deck too? Because I see that's the old American Sky facility, correct?
Right, yeah. So that'd be 70 total inside and out.
In and out.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Move to approve with stipulations that Mr. Gray has made on behalf of city staff.
I'll second.
Motion is second to approve. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Public hearing on conditional use permit application for filling and grading within a slope preservation zone NR 118.07 sub 5 and construction of structural erosion control measures in a slope preservation zone NR 118.07 sub 6 at 5 St. Croix Street, XL Energy.
Explain that.
So, again, another public hearing. Is there anyone here that'd like to make a comment on this? Any comment? Any comment?
My name's Lars Glockstein. I live at 115 River Street, and that's adjacent to the parcel. Is there a soils report that's been received or taken of what the contamination is? Do you know?
Dave, you can go on into your question.
Yeah, I believe the applicant is here, and I know that they have provided some information in regards to that. I don't know if they would like to speak during the public comment section.
I'm just curious if there's a report.
We can't answer the questions during the public hearing process.
Okay.
We'll answer it at the next agenda item.
Yeah, I mean, it's up for consideration. Any other comment? All right, any other comments? Any other comments? Any other comments?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion is second to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Public hearing is closed. Discussion possible action on a conditional use permit application for filling and grading within a slope preservation zone NR 118.07 sub 5 and construction of structural erosion control measures in a slope preservation zone NR 118.07 sub 6 at 5 St. Croix Street, XL Energy.
I can take this, Mayor.
Yes, please.
So the applicant is proposing to do a number of things on the property. In the staff report, it's on page 1. They're going to be installing temporary erosion control measures. They're going to be removing vegetation from atop the impacted materials. They're going to be excavating those impacted materials and hauling them off-site and disposing them in a different location. They're going to bring back in clean fill to make up the difference so that ultimately the change in elevation is going to be fairly minimal on the property. It's not like they're digging it down and leaving it down. They're going to dig it down and then replace it with clean fill. They're going to construct at least a footprint of a bike trail across the property to extend the existing trail that ends at St. Croix Street. They're going to restore the remainder of the property. And along the river, there's a section that's fairly steep, and so that section gets some additional erosion mat vegetated riprap, that sort of thing. Because you're in the slope preservation zone in an area that's over 12%, we have to go through this process to do a conditional use permit that allows them to do the filling and grading. Usually, we've seen a number of these that have come through where the applicant is doing filling and grading in order to construct a building or construct a new parking lot. This is kind of the opposite. They're kind of deconstructing what was there before. They're getting rid of it. They're removing the contaminated materials. That being said, we still suggested that you go through this conditional use permit so that as we go through all of these, that we're being consistent with how we're applying this. Towards the end, there's a staff recommendation. Should you concur with the recommendation, we would suggest that you have the following 5 conditions. The first is that the restoration shall be of native seed mixture. That's one of the conditions of the of NR 118. The second is that the final site plan approval will be approved by city staff. There are some minor comments that we've had with respect to the site plan that really don't impact the general nature of the improvements, but the angle of the road or of the trail coming into where it comes into Second Street or into First Street, that sort of thing. They are required to provide all necessary DNR approvals. They provided those to us, I believe, on Monday. So we've seen those permits come in. And then the last 2 are there any omissions? We're not releasing them from any responsibilities in the city ordinances, and that these conditions run upon the land. I can't imagine that Excel is going to sell the property in the middle of this deconstruction, but theoretically they could. So we're recommending approval.
Move to approve with the staff recommendations. And if I could speak, Mr. Mayor, this kind of comes out of parks. We've been working with Xcel Energy for a number of years to acquire their property north of St. Croix Street and the entrance to the depot. And at one time it was looked at, they would sell it to the city, and then after their legal reviews and everything else, it was determined it made more sense for them to go the direction that they are, and we'll have a long-term lease on the property. But they're improving it. They're doing the things that, in other words, parks would have done had we just acquired it as a raw piece of ground. So they're enhancing their, if you will, gift to the city in doing this. So we'll have the rest of the shoreline from the horse bridge going out to the old depot site around to the city garage.
We've got a motion?
Yes, that's a motion.
No, we have a motion.
And I will second it then,
Okay, we've got a motion, a second. Discussion?
with the conditions, of course.
I think there's a few people here that want to talk to the issue. I'd like to hear some of it because there's some confusion on exactly what the homeowners abutting have issues with down there. I don't know if that's been heard.
Sure.
or not.
And one of the things I should point out, that when Mike and I walked with the representatives of Xcel out there, we brought up the issues like dog at your house, that there's some vagary on the property lines where adjacent property owners, when it used to be an alley through there, would be able to come into there and pull into the back of their garages and the like. And now that all the surveying and everything has finally been done, it's turning out that there were some inaccuracies. Mike, I don't know of a better way to put it, but that we wanted to work. We were asking Xcel and wanted to work with them to resolve it on your behalf, that all those issues be cleared up and access issues be granted.
Yep, and you're right, Pat, and I think, Excel's been a very a good partner. He's approaching all of the homeowners along First Street there to try to work through some of the encroachment issues that have taken place, some of the property line issues that haven't taken place, trying to find resolution to those, so we applaud their efforts on that front. I think, the thing to keep in mind too, we didn't really get into when the project is proposed to take place, but it would be this summer in the first phase, within the next month or so, and then again this fall for the more steep slopes nearest the river. So, yep, Excel's been very open to communicating and very willing to work through, what could be kind of a challenging issue, but ultimately will turn into a benefit for the community with the extension of the bike trail.
But have they answered the concerns of the residents down there? I haven't heard that.
Is everybody okay with the new
Is every,
lot lines,
that's a
all
big
the
question to you
definitions, all
folks.
that
If you
stuff?
have an issue, please come to the podium and we can try and address it or be sure that it is addressed.
But in a sense, Mike, you're saying that they're allowing the easement for access to the back of their properties.
Yes.
But yet there's a chain link fence being proposed and barbed wire on the far west side. Is that correct?
No?
I think it's pretty tacky.
Yeah, it's temporary during construction.
During construction.
The barbed wire.
I don't know.
Barbed wire.
Should be no problem.
That's it, yep.
The barbed wire on the back side of the property on the Willow River side. If the legend is correct.
Audrey, is your designer here?
So Kelsey John, 1215 First Street. Sorry, this is my first time here. I don't really have any concerns aside from, well, I guess we do have the questions about future access to the back of our property. And then also the concern of a future potential building being put up. Is that?
As far as parks are concerned, one of the agreements, and how can I say it, the dance with Excel Energy is all around the fact that it used to be the old site of the old roundhouse from when the turn of the last century when the railroad was there. And it's been known to the city and DNR and everyone for decades that the soils underneath there are bad. And one of the stipulations that the Excel has putting on it is that we can't dig down in and reach those encapsulated soils, and that there won't be anything other than probably a parking lot or a surface, something on the surface taking place there, like a picnic stand or a gazebo of some kind.
Okay. So no large
excavating.
condos?
No.
Okay.
No, this is actually keeping that from ever happening.
Okay.
Do you have test results on the soil borings, Andrea? Do you have those?
So first of all, thank you. I'm Andrea Jorgensen, representing Excel Energy. Your question was, what are you asking, Randy?
What's in the soil? We know what was there.
So basically, it's debris from previous businesses that was there, the roundhouse that he was speaking to. It's glass, metal, basic construction materials, old woods, that type of thing. It's pretty minimal.
No different than probably the bike bed that the track was on with creosote, et cetera.
And across the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brick, wood, concrete, glass, and metal scrap.
Does that answer your question?
Mine?
Yes.
Yes and no. You know, there's probably PCBs or some, of that nature. I don't know what the particles are.
I can, if it's all right, I'll invite our environmental specialist here, and he can maybe fill you in on
Yeah,
some
it
of those
doesn't have to be
details.
now, but.
No, now's the time.
Let's
Never
hear
it. Yeah, let's hear it.
Let's hear
Yes,
it.
my name's Ben Zek. I'm Excel's environmental project manager for this project. There is no PCBs. We tested for that. We advanced 32 borings, 34 hand augers, 12 trenches, just to see what was there. We've pretty much run all the analytical on it, and again, it's primarily related with old construction debris and some incomplete combustion byproduct, typical to what you would find in old rail beds. So,
Thank you.
yeah, any other environmental? Okay. Yep.
And then Randy, in answer to your question regarding the fencing is going up. It's strictly for construction site identification, and it will be coming down again.
So on the backside of their properties, that fence will come down?
Yes.
Okay.
However, the property behind it does belong to Excel Energy. So as far as access to their property, it is still.
Are you going to allow it for having them to have access to the backside of their properties?
Well, unfortunately, no. That will be Excel Energy property, and it's going to be managed from my understanding, by the city.
We maintain it.
But we will still maintain ownership until we have the clearance on the soils and everything's set to go.
I'm not sure that answers the folks' questions down there. Is easement going to be granted to those people that have had it for years?
It is Excel Energy property.
I understand that.
There's not an easement.
There's never been an easement.
There's no easements on record of any kind in the back.
No, not for access across property that we don't own. If there was one, it would be between Northern States Power or Excel and the owners.
Well, I think that's a
Can we-
concern to be addressed.
How do we address that, or is it something that we
Issue
can't?
between two private property owners though, too. You know, there's some building permit data that we have referencing, one particular, I don't want to single specific properties out, but that specifies, access not to be granted through Northern States Power. But there's no easements of file or on record that we have available to us. And, I think Excel, like I said, they've done I think a commendable job, at least trying to work through this with the residents along that, along First there. But, I can't force an easement on
Right.
Excel.
But, the whole good neighbor thing, I don't know if Andrea's, if you understand what I'm talking about there, but they've been using that for a very long time. And I know it's your property, period, I get that. But being a good neighbor would help. And I believe there were suggestions of those property owners buying the pieces of the land behind it.
Well, currently at this point with the
That won't happen.
erosion control, we are not able to sell that
I
property.
get that, okay. But is that a possibility?
To be addressed when the tests and
Yeah.
everything is completed. Then I'll be able to answer that question.
Okay.
At this point in time, I can't.
There's your answer. Thank you.
Is there?
Any other comments? Anybody?
I just had one comment. On your zoning maps, they do show an alley behind the buildings there. The 2030 and then the 2007, I think it is. So it does show on your zoning map that there's an alley back there.
How many environmental you want to go through and talk about the surveys and things like that, Dev?
Yeah, so the property has been surveyed numerous times by multiple different survey crews. We've used the most conservative plat descriptions in the legal descriptions for the surveys. And we've erred on the side of the homeowners as far as reference points and staking off the land. If anything, we've been, I guess, more generous based on those initial plat descriptions that are legal descriptions of the parcel. So I guess as far as the survey markers go, those are, they've been referenced by multiple different crews and internal and external consultants to make sure that our lines are just and accurate.
Has your legal identified any surveys in your title work or anything like that?
Well, I think the survey and the title work,
The easements,
or
sorry.
the easements,
Yeah.
no, there's been no easements. And actually, if anything, we do have a legal agreement with the city of Hudson and the county of St. Croix that if we ever were to sell this property, they would have first rights to purchasing it.
Who would have first right?
It's the county or the city, depending on there's a percentage split between the different. And I think this was a document in the 80s. We have no evidence of any legal agreements with private residences. I guess the other issue I think that I would just like to bring up is if we are proposing a bike path through this area, I think the use of an access drive kind of, you have a health and safety risk there and an increased hazard associated with, having cars come through adjacent to a bike path, but.
Yeah, anybody else? Anything? All right, we have a motion, a second in front of us.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, Fred?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on a certified survey map for 435 Brick Circle Extraterritorial Zone, Town of Troy, KAJ Foods, Carrie Jacobson.
Carrie Jacobson has submitted a certified survey map to the city to divide St. Croix County tax parcel 040-1036-70000. This proposed subdivision is located within the city's extraterritorial zone, therefore requires the city's approval as per municipal code. Proposed lots meet our extraterritorial zoning lot size and land use requirements, so staff is recommending approval of the certified survey map.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Got a motion, a second to approve. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion possible action on a rezoning recommendation of the Common Council for a zoning map amendment from RM1 multiple family residential to RM2 multiple family residential and a comprehensive plan amendment from medium density residential to high density residential at St. Croix County tax parcel 236-2041-00-000 Landvest LLC.
Thank you. I think at this point, we're all pretty familiar with this property after the rezoning request earlier in the year to change from general business B2 to the RM1. The applicant is now desirous of rezoning to RM2 to create the opportunity for more density on the site. You'll see the proposed three-story structure with parking, both underground. It's 152 units and surface. Before we get too far into it, obviously the biggest challenge we have here, or the biggest thing that I think has to be addressed, and you'll see it in my recommendation, is the access on Old 35. I'm sure there's a number of people in the audience that want to maybe speak to this. I know the applicants here as well as the representatives. So, the park and ride that's owned by the state of Wisconsin DOT is immediately adjacent to the north of this, and then obviously the Hudson Meadows single-family subdivision north of that. I think, as we've looked at this, council's directive when the council set the public hearing date of June 17th was to also instruct staff to work with the DOT to identify what our opportunity or options would be, as well as work with the town of Hudson to identify, is there an opportunity for the city to potentially take over the maintenance component of that road, ownership, what might that look like? Since that time, we have heard from the DOT. The DOT has suggested that they would potentially be willing to sell the park and ride to the city. I don't know what the price of that is. I've further inquired as to what that might look like. They have put a requirement on that the property would ultimately, some or all of it would have to be used for transportation purposes. What does that mean? I don't know at this point. Again, a follow-up question. So does that mean if the city of Hudson purchased it, would we be looking at just managing the park and ride as is? Could we theoretically look at cutting it in half and creating a park or a buffer space from the neighboring residents in Hudson Meadows? Again, those are still the questions that are out there. Never mind the fact that, we have to work with the town, but now that we have at least some direction from the state, we can do that. The other piece that we could entertain, and the DOT suggested might be an opportunity, would be to say, they maintain ownership, but then voluntarily annex that property into the city of Hudson, and then we work out some sort of joint access agreement. which would provide access to a development, whether it's this property in its current form or a rezoned form. And then we just, shift that access further away from the access into Hudson Meadows, closer to the property line of this specific parcel. That's an opportunity too that we want to explore. So again, the applicant here is here. They might want to make a few comments, as well as I know several residents. So with that, I'll turn it over for questions.
Any comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name's Nick Vivian. I'm the attorney representing the project. I have with me Dick Morris, the developer, and Tim Soderberg. So as the Plan Commission recalls, this is the property on the corner of Hanley and Old 35. On your map, it shows as B2. Last fall, it was rezoned to RM1, which would allow currently, it's a 6-acre site or so, would allow currently for a 97-unit apartment complex under your comprehensive plan and under the RM1 zoning. So the site plan that we have, you have a copy in your packet, but if we weren't to deal with an access onto Old 35, currently a developer could develop an apartment complex, 97 units, with the sole access being up into the Hudson Meadows development through the cul-de-sac, which is already planned. That would then move that traffic up through that neighborhood and then out of the neighborhood out to Old 35. That's not what we're proposing, obviously. We're here because we want to be part of the solution, which is to also provide for access from this site out to Old 35. So we know we have a challenging development site. Dick Morris and his team have put together this development plan, which provides for a 3-story building, 152 units of market rate, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, that then will have traffic circulation, which will be principally out to Old 35. And we'll be seeking a full turn lane in and out of this particular development. You'll see that there's internal parking, surface level parking for 152 spots, and then as Mr. Johnson indicated, there's also underground parking. As from a topographical perspective, this site sits very low. It's kind of in a depression off of Hanley and Old 35. So the profile of the building will actually, in all likelihood, be that of a 2-story building or so. You'll note that there's additional green space along the interstate. So there's green space here. There's a play area on this side, and then there's an infiltration basin along the Hanley and into the Old 35 intersection. This site, it's always a challenge when you look at comp plan amendments to say the density increases, and so if we allow for greater density on a site, will the developers then develop more than 152 units? The bottom line for this site is that 152 units is all that this site can handle. From a parking perspective, it's not possible to add any additional parking to this site. From a green space perspective, it's not possible to acquire any additional green space. We know that the park and ride is perhaps available, but it's available to the city and not to the developer. And so this is the site. This is what you will get if in fact the comprehensive plan amendment is adopted, and if in fact the zoning is changed from RM1 to RM2. It's not a site that you're going to see 200 apartments or more. This site can hold 152 units, and that's it. So we're really capped and limited at what we can do. We like the layout. We think it's a good layout with an ample amount of green space and parking, which works. It meets your parking requirements. It meets your green space requirements. And, you know, ultimately, we've been very happy with the city and having the conversations regarding Old 35, because we think from a site planning perspective that that's the best option. We'd rather not send 97 units of traffic up through Meadowlark and up through the Hudson Meadows neighborhood. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I know Dick is happy to take any questions as well.
You had mentioned that there was underground parking. How many spaces is that, and does that reduce the need for surface parking for more green space on the property?
Well, you have a requirement of 2 to 1 for parking.
I know,
So
I understand that.
Yeah,
But
so there are,
you had said there was underground, but you didn't say how many.
correct. So there's 152 underground and 152 surface.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Nick, explain to me a little bit about this entrance in and out on Meadowlark. That is not obviously what we want to do.
Correct.
So explain how you're going to do this safely for that neighborhood over there.
So originally, I think when this entire area was platted, my guess is that this particular lot was intended to be developed as single family. And so currently, there's a cul-de-sac or a temporary cul-de-sac that sits right here. When we looked at the site, we obviously want to keep that. There's a public, Meadowlark is a public road that effectively terminates at this property line. So it's there, and it will continue to be an access point for this particular property. But the way the parking lot is designed, the access to Old 35 will be here, as far north on the property as it can. So it's as far north of the Hanley Old 35 intersection. And that will provide the primary access to go north or south on Old 35. Now, is it possible that people will use Meadowlark to travel north? It's possible, but it's going to be far less direct and far less efficient. So our assumption is that people will use the direct access onto Old 35, and principally for most commuters, they're going to travel south on Old 35 to Hanley, and then they're going to jump on the interstate and head up to 94 and go to the cities or head toward Eau Claire. But for those heading back into the city of Hudson, up to the movie theater or up into the Carmichael corridor, they'll travel north on Old 35. The cul-de-sac, it won't be a cul-de-sac anymore, but the access up to Meadowlark will provide an alternate access to the site, but it's certainly not going to be primary, and we don't anticipate that the use is going to be significant.
Thank you.
Kind of back to my issue again, I'm looking at this right here, and all the land around it is retention basin, you know, except for the little children's play area up on the top right, and a little bit of a children's play area at the top left. You know, the rest is all parking lot. And so, back to my question, where's the green space? I mean, is there gonna be picnic tables? Is there gonna be anything outside for, say somebody's in there with kids or riding bikes or whatever, are they gonna have to ride through a parking lot? What are they gonna do? And if they get,
There'll be some paths around there. There also.
Could you step up, identify yourself, please?
There also is a large deck. I'm Tim Soderberg. I'm one of the partners, Dick. There's also a large deck off the back and community room, and it'll provide some space. And on the east and the west ends, there's some patio space. You see how it jogs out like that? So there is a lot of recreational areas. A lot of amenities we're putting in here. There's going to be a community room, a workout area, children's play area. There'll be offices for people that want an office down there. It's popular today for people who live in their apartment. Maybe a salesman or something on the road, and they can go down to this office and get Wi-Fi and everything else. So it's going to have quite a few amenities.
So this is high-end then housing, or it's,
No, we've had a market study, and it's gonna meet what the local market is.
Market rate.
Yeah, based upon the income and demographics for the area and the needs of the residents.
The other thing I want to add, though, too, is that we are confined in site planning by your ordinances. So your ordinances require a certain amount of green space, which we're meeting the ordinance, and your ordinances do require the 2 per 1 parking. And that was a change made not too long ago by the council to actually accommodate some apartment construction in the city. Now, the challenge, though, is that 2 for 1, or 2 to 1 is still a high standard in terms of the amount of space that it takes up. And so reality is that it takes a certain amount of surface parking to ensure that we're able to meet.
but he answered me, so, thank you. You just can't see it on this drawing, that's right.
Yeah.
Is there a motion?
Well, I'd like to
Any
hear
of the, yeah, if there's any residents in
Okay.
Good evening. Dwight Jordan, 615 Old Highway 35 South, property within 300 feet of this proposed development. So, one question I have I'm just doing my little simple math. 304 more cars and however many more human occupants living on that road for the last 40 years. There's some safety issues there already. I'm concerned, the gentlemen say that the drive would come out onto 35. If that came out, would that be coming out through the proposed park and ride? And if it is, then that would be, it seems to me it'd be more congestion. So I'm just looking at getting my head around it to see what this is about and how it's going to work out and learn more about it.
Hi, I'm John Connolly, 57 Meadowlark Lane, so I'm within 300 feet. My concern is if you open up the cul-de-sac and have 304 vehicles going through that area, it's a very congested area as it is. I mean, when I just come around the corner, the school bus is there's lots of kids right there. I mean, it's just going to be a nut house. A lot of the residents are already selling their places. There's a lot of nervousness there. I just got back from Florida, so I'm just hearing about it now, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of concern and probably a lot of people here on the 17th, but I would propose, please don't open up the cul-de-sac. I mean, it'll be bad enough having all that, but it's going to be pretty hairy. There's a lot of little kids in that area. I think it'd be pretty dangerous.
Excuse me. My name's Ivor Branson. I live at 603 Old Highway 35, within 300 feet. From what I just heard, it sounds like the entrance would be pretty much right across the street from my house. I've looked at that park and ride I've been there for over 20 years now. I was pretty young when I got that property, but I woke up to the bulldozers and stuff, coming in there, so I missed that meeting. I'm here at this one to kind of go, seems like a lot of people for that little area. My daughter likes to go across the street and play. It's already dangerous enough. The park and ride was a bad move. It's always empty. It's not kept up. It's an eyesore. Cops sit in there. People speed down that road. I just see this as too many people in that area. I just wanted to be on record saying that. I don't think it's a good idea. That's it. I think my wife here might have something to say.
Eva Branson, 603 Old Highway 35 South, so within that 300 feet. Same concerns. I can't tell you how many accidents we've had at Hanley and 35. We can hear them from our house. I can't even imagine putting another 300 cars and people and 150 units. If that's families moving in there, we'll say 2 kids per unit. That's another 300 kids in our school systems. I'm not sure. I know Rivercrest within that first year had to do all kinds of rezoning, very upset parents. I'd have to actually look up the numbers on where our schools stand. And then I'm also kind of concerned about the aesthetics. We've got a nice, single family with low to medium density duplexes and stuff like that within that community already. And now we put in a high-rise type apartment complex. It feels disjointed. I'm not sure what that looks like years down the road, what kind of people that is going to bring in. No offense, to people that might be in the lower income bracket, but I just worry about property values declining. So I'll have to do more research, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
And I want to share one other comment when I have the opportunity. I've never been a city dweller, grew up on farm, still have acreage there. One concern that I don't know how it will go if the proposed development went in, if the city of Hudson, if the town of Hudson or city, whatever the term is, would take over the road, which is a county road. The other concern I would have for myself and the property owners along there is what would be the future considerations, cost, and interest bearing down the road for curb and gutters, which would affect my property greatly, my costs greatly, and the future of my property. So I don't know. Right now, I think the county takes care of that mile from Hanley up to the movie theater. But if this came in, then my question on the table would be, does the city take that over? So
We've had that same question.
okay, so I'm getting hoarse in my allergies. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Let me address a couple of the concerns that were brought up. First, just as it relates to the park and ride, the entrance is not proposed to go through the park and ride. The entrance is proposed to be on this particular property. We've not planned this site with respect to anything happening at the park and ride, and we can't because we don't own it or control it. So the entrance is proposed to be here. Second, I do want to focus on the question of who lives in multifamily housing, because we don't have a lot of market rate multifamily housing in the city of Hudson. We know from talking with the superintendent of schools that we need more market rate housing for our teachers to live and work here in the city of Hudson. We know from talking with the chief of police that there are officers in your department that don't live in Hudson because there's not a lot of market rate apartments. We have apartments with income restrictions, and unfortunately there are a lot of people that make more than those income restrictions that don't have options in the city of Hudson. So from a market rate perspective, apartments and multifamily housing is needed in this particular community. And so, we look at this as an opportunity to add more diverse opportunities for housing for people who live and who work in the city of Hudson. We know that there are more jobs coming in with Phillips and Mayo and others that are continuing to build in the business community in Hudson, and we need opportunities for everybody to live here. To the question about density, in general, this entire area of the city is more dense. When you look at Heritage Greens, when you look at Lighthouse, when you look at Hudson Meadows, this is a more dense part of the city. This is kind of a forgotten corner of the city, though, as it sits. And so you have Old 35 that is under town control. You don't have sidewalks, you don't have trails, you don't have connectivity. And part of what's being proposed by this development is some semblance of bringing this corner of the city back into a development that feels more like the city and hopefully connects this corner to the rest of the city in a better, more effective way. And presumably with staff's recommendation that the city take jurisdictional control of Old 35, that will help that process and help provide some connection. So, from our perspective, this site is already zoned to move forward with 97 units, but to move forward with 97 units in a manner which doesn't feel like it works particularly well, directing all that traffic through the neighborhood. So in order to make for an economically viable project, and in order to provide for traffic circulation, and in order to actually bring this in a meaningful way, the proposal has been thought through to say, how do we do this in a way that makes sense. We're also aware of the concerns regarding traffic on Old 35. We want to make sure that there are turn lanes in and out. We want to make sure that it's a safe access point. And from that perspective, we have work to do with the city. We know that in talking about Old 35 and how those improvements are made. And so from our perspective, that the question here is about zoning, and it's about the comprehensive plan amendment. When it gets to the question of what does that intersection look like, what do those turns lane look like, what are we required to do from a development perspective, those are conversations that need to continue, and certainly discussions that we'll be having with the city as to how that layout works together to ensure that those areas and those access points are as safe as they can possibly be.
Bill. Good evening, Plan Commission members. Bill Alms, Alderperson 2, so I'm representative to this district. I did want to clarify, Nick, when you had said that it currently is medium density, you're looking for high density. Are you suggesting that the medium density would have to go through Hudson Meadows for it to be economically viable for this? Is that what you?
Not for it to be economically viable. It's currently the way it's zoned. We could move forward with a development plan that doesn't require additional approval from the city. From a use perspective, we'd still have to get building approval. But from a use perspective, this site is entitled to move forward with the access being through Hudson Prairie development, or Hudson Meadow development, correct.
Okay.
Staff's recommendation would still be to recommend that they need to come off of Old 35.
So I guess my comments really kind of go back to actually a situation that happened, I don't know, about a year and a half ago. We started talking about resurfacing Hanley Road, and I just asked that we take a pause for a second and look at the safety of Hanley Road. At the time was 4 lanes, 2 lanes headed both directions. There's a lot of people that want to utilize the sidewalks there. I completely agree with what you say, Nick, that Hudson Meadows, this corner of the city is a forgotten, it's not connected to the rest of the city, right? You're talking Old 35, which has, gravel shoulders. There's no good access trail-wise walking to Hanley Road. I guess I would just ask for a little bit of pause here. Number one, do we as a city want to take over Old 35, look at curb and gutter? How do we see this corner being connected? And it's on the very edge of the city, right? The other question I have is Hanley and 35 intersection. With the access point coming out just north of Hanley, are we looking at lighted signs at Hanley and 35? What does that look like from a safety perspective as we add traffic to that area? Is that a lighted signal there? And I guess that's all I have, is just taking a pause and seeing what do they come back with on the park and ride, in terms of, are we able to purchase it? What does that look like?
How much time are you asking for, Bill?
I would say, well, we have public hearing already set, right? Which is on the 17th, which cannot be delayed. Is that correct?
Correct. The public hearing will go on, correct.
Public hearing will go on. I don't know. I almost want to throw it back to you. What do you think? I mean, as far as a planning commission, to have those conversations, what, 2 months, 3 months?
I don't know, we haven't really deliberated yet as a group.
No, we don't have a motion yet, but I'm just curious. I mean, I
Mhm.
certainly,
I mean, and I don't mean to, I don't mean to delay your decision, but I think this is, and I have to apologize, maybe late to the game in bringing this up, right? Because it is a forgotten part of the city, and I just want to make sure that we're mindful of the future and what that looks like. But I don't know that it takes more than 3 months to figure that out.
so what does that do for construction period?
Well, I appreciate Bill's perspective. I mean, we've had conversations about this. We have an agreement to purchase the property from the bank, which requires us to purchase it by the end of the month based on the schedule that we're at, and the schedule that we're on, which was important because we've been working on this for a while. From a zoning perspective, we've taken into account all the comments that we've received. If we push this back by another 3 months, we're not going to get in the ground this year. So, and the question is, how will that affect the purchase with the bank? We don't know. And I understand that the need to plan, and we're not here to suggest that you shouldn't plan and there shouldn't be meetings, and we've offered ourselves and made ourselves available to have meetings with the residents. We want to be part of the overall solution. And, like I say, this is, when you look at this site, it's zoned for 97 units, however it comes out, whatever the access point is, so it already has some density, and there's already going to be multifamily there in one form or another. And I think we can work with the city on access points, we can work with the city on flow, we can work with the city on turn lanes, but this site, comp plan wise and zoning wise, is going to be a higher density, probably multi-unit development. And so from that perspective, we'd ask that this not be delayed. We'd ask that we be part of the process going forward, and we're happy to do that and to address the concerns. But we'd really like the Plan Commission to make a recommendation and to continue on with the schedule that we've been on.
I want to introduce just some thinking here about this as being just one piece to the puzzle. That we all know that Mayo has purchased property by the movie house and in that area, and so the whole character of that part of the town is going to change. The comments about 35 and things like that, it's going to change. There's going to be no changing it, because once you get a big clinic or any type of service facility of any size in there, which I have to believe they're doing, the whole dimension of everything changes. And so is that 35 a critical juncture in access to that? Yes, it is. I mean, obviously, we all know that. So I guess I just look at this whole issue, and I appreciate everything you've said and done here as part of a bigger issue of what do we do with that entire area, knowing that some of this stuff is coming, and are we just going to let it land piecemeal and deal with it piecemeal, or are we going to put it together a little bit, as to how we'd like to see it? I don't know the answer to these questions, but I'm just, like I said, introducing that thought that I think that whole area in 5 years is going to be so radically different than you call it forgotten, not for long.
Exactly.
And so it's just we haven't seen the triggers yet that have pulled the action that are going to come there quickly that cause these changes. So I don't like delaying anybody. I realize everything you said, time is money, lose a year construction, all that stuff. But I just think in the scheme of things, this is a much bigger issue than just your property. It's the whole area. And I just had to say that because I feel pretty strongly about that. We don't know what could and might happen up there. I mean, what other type of commercial development might come in with Mayo? Oh my gosh, that whole area all the way out to the old JR Ranch or that Highway 12, that's all going to change. I mean, in 20 years, that we won't recognize that. So I don't know. What am I saying? I don't know what I'm saying. It's just I'm saying there's.
It's pretty high density.
Yeah. I don't know what to say. I guess I wanted to introduce that thinking and thought to this being just one little piece of that.
You know, Landvest LLC, we just got done with the Mayor Road project and that development, the old, who owned that property out there? Lee property? You guys worked very well. In all fairness to you guys, you answered this body's and the council's body's questions. You worked with us moving forward after we approved it, and that was appreciative. If we could do that again in this partnership, maybe there's a way to get to this without just piecemealing it, as you would say. I think they're willing to work. They showed that they're willing to work and change their plans, invest in their plans on Mayor Road to be a part of the community. And that's a plus to you guys, in my mind, to making this a viable, safe access piece of property. I'm very mindful, because I just went through it with my constituents up there, Bill, of safety and that. And they addressed those issues. They didn't have that go through on River Ridge Road. You guys stopped that. You didn't put an access point there. Is that possible there? You're saying no on this project to connect that access.
It's possible.
Well, it's a question of working with city staff. And, you know, from our perspective, I don't think we necessarily want anybody to go up through Hudson Meadows. We don't see a need for it. So when we look at it, though, that public road terminates at our property. And I don't know how the cul-de-sac lays out. I think the cul-de-sac probably sits on this property in terms of how it lays out currently from a temporary perspective. But, you know, obviously you can't have a dead-end street with no hammerhead or no turnaround. And I don't know what exactly is to the north. There may be houses directly to the north, in fact. Yes, there is. So to put a cul-de-sac on somebody else's property is not possible for us, but there's a conversation to be had that, you know, perhaps the 35 entrance is the only entrance into the site. But then we have to work with others to site plan as to how it works north of this particular site. But you're exactly right, Randy. These guys, from the perspective of working through the Mayor Road site, we heard the Plan Commission when it said on that site, we don't want high-density apartments. So we pulled that back. We worked with the Plan Commission and the council on the Riverway District issues. We worked with the Plan Commission and the council on the townhome issues. We want to develop right, and we expect to develop more in the city of Hudson. And the only way you do that is by developing relationships with the Plan Commission, the council, and staff. And so that's our mindset. This isn't get in, get out, and go to some other community. This is develop properly here in the city of Hudson.
Bill? Anything more?
So, beg your pardon on this question. Walking through timing, right? So you're recommending to council, public hearing happens on the 17th of June, potential vote happens on 17th of June. You need to know your hopes are to know by end of June, is that correct?
Correct. Well, our hopes would be to know at the city council meeting, just because of the timing of scheduling meetings. But as you'll see from the staff recommendation, staff recommends approval subject to the city accepting jurisdictional control of Old 35 before our development plans are submitted. And so there's some additional process there with the town that has to happen on accepting jurisdictional control, and then back to the city council. So the vote at the council meeting will be related to the rezoning, but it does contain conditions which then ultimately take us out into the future, which is why this is important for the vote to happen at the council meeting, because there's still probably a month of process, or maybe longer, depending on the town board schedule and the city council schedule, to then take over jurisdiction, publish the rezoning ordinance, and then have all this done. But we're willing to take the leap of faith with the city that if that vote's taken, that ultimately Old 35 comes in because the town has indicated a willingness to turn over jurisdiction, and the discussions to date with the city council have been an interest to bring in Old 35 to connect that portion of the city and to create that corridor.
So, Bill, the way that would be facilitated would be to restrict the publication of the ordinance. You know, so an ordinance comes into, you know, it's in effect once it's published. So you'd condition it so that the ordinance couldn't be published until that access question was answered.
Right.
And then in addition to that, before we'd look at development plans.
I gotcha. I just would like to see that big picture for that corner. I don't know, you've been working with this one a little bit longer than I have, but.
One question is, the bigger issue is the density, is it not?
You're exactly right. If you boil it all
How much
down,
do we want
you get to 97
that
or
much
152 type of question.
On that site.
100 to 300.
Yeah. And maybe they're trying to put 10 pounds into a 5-pound bag, and economically it doesn't work, but do we want it there? Do we want that high a density?
That's as remote as you're gonna get.
Yeah.
What's that, Fred?
I say it's as remote as you're gonna get in the city. I mean, it's in the further edge corner. I mean, if that's any consolation, it's not in the middle of town where it would really cause trouble. I mean, it's already causing issues on the old Highway 35, but put it somewhere else and oh boy, it'd be compounded.
Right. And then we add on the potential Mayo site and what's around there.
Well, we can't guess to the future, but we have to anticipate it.
Correct.
But at the end of the day, you have to recall that they have worked with us.
Yes.
They have gone forward with us on the other project, so why wouldn't they go forward with us on that to answer the questions that you want answered as far as the 35 and then the access points, whether we allow that access point or not.
Right.
But anybody developing that site is going to have to work with us.
So we have a reputation, they have a reputation with us, working with us, and following some of the direction we had asked. And now, if we don't do it, then do we have some developer just come in willy-nilly, like Fred said, and just drop something there and go?
No, because we still have to approve that.
Sure, but they could just.
We don't have to
do the
change the
50.
zoning or the density, though.
Yeah, but they
See,
could just.
my fear of rezoning it, and as Nick said, taking the leap of, that you guys would take the leap of faith even before we had access worked out. Well, then what if access doesn't work out? And they say, you know what, we're selling it, and then you get someone that comes in and dumps something.
Right.
I don't like to rezone it without all our ducks in a row.
Well, and I can.
I mean, we've already rezoned it once.
And I can speak to that question. We're not going to sell it. If it doesn't get rezoned, we're going to build a 97 unit complex. Now, you can say, well, why should we just not rezone it and you can build a 97 unit complex? Well, you know, contrary to staff's direction that they'd still like an access onto Old 35, the only authority that the city has over a 97 unit complex is to approve or to disapprove our building plans. The city does not have the authority to force us to access out onto Old 35 with a 97 unit apartment complex.
But we don't have to allow you to go into the neighborhood either.
Sure you do.
No, we just can't block you from having access.
Well, we have a road that terminates at our property. So we already have access.
You have access to that and you abut 2 other roads, so.
Correct, but that's going to be our access point. So, I mean, from our.
But then it goes back to we don't have to approve that either.
But you do, because you have to provide us access. I mean, that's
on Highway 35.
The next step, well, no, because the town has the authority over Old 35. And so the city doesn't currently, if the city said, we're not interested in the Old 35 component, then we have access to a city street. which is Meadowlark, and the city has no jurisdiction over Old 35. And we come back with a plan for 97 units and submit our building plans. And the approval, Plan Commission, City Council, is site plan development approval for the buildings. And so from our perspective, what we're trying to do is we're trying to be part of the solution. We're trying to master plan a site so that it works, and so that it works for this developer, but so that it's also a positive addition to the city in this part of the city's jurisdiction. And I don't say we'll build a 97-unit apartment complex to be adversarial, because that's not the case. That's not the project that we want to build. We want to build this project because we think it's a better project, because we think the need is there, and because we think we can do it in a safe and viable way that really contributes to the community.
Could I make a comment, please? My name is Gail Connolly. My husband John spoke. We live at 57 Meadowlark Lane. So we would be right near that cul-de-sac that you're speaking of, sir. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with that road. It's from the cul-de-sac that goes to the corner. It's a very short road, very windy, very busy right now. I cannot imagine, even if you do 90 units, that would be 180 vehicles coming down that road. I just don't see that working. I don't know if they show that correctly on their map, but, sir, that just would not work.
Has there been any traffic study, traffic review, and a thought process on that?
Not at this point.
Is that something that could be, I mean, we're
Kinda-
hitching kind of on the old 35.
Exactly, but we also have to figure out whether or not they're gonna have access to Old 35 too. And then we get into the whole traffic study discussion, and
Any other comments? We still don't have a motion before us.
I'm gonna make a motion to postpone it until the next planning commission, so it has a little time to sink in, and we can digest some of this stuff and think it through and maybe get some answers to some of the questions here from everybody, and then come back here and try to wrestle with it and get it resolved. So my motion is to postpone until the next planning commission. This is like a ton of bricks has hit me almost. That's how I feel about this. It's a big whopper of a fish that what do you do with it?
I'll second.
All right, we got a motion, second to postpone. Mary Claire.
Can I just ask, so what specific questions are you looking for answers for?
Well, the road part of it, I mean, we've kind of been given some partial answers. We've had prior discussions on this site where we would ask the developers to assume the cost of getting Highway 35, old Highway 35 up to city code. I think the city needs to know, what would happen there. Of course, you're not gonna say that to us until you get what you need and want, and so I do understand that. But things like that, and then just, I don't see how 2 weeks is gonna kill us, but I just want it to sink in a little bit and think it through a little bit. That's me. Maybe you're not that way, but that's how I am.
I would agree. I think if nothing else, it gives, hopefully Mike will know more from the state by then. I think that, my opinion is that 35 is imperative. So where the state comes into it with that, I don't know, but I'm in full agreement with you.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion possible action on preliminary development plans and a rezoning recommendation to the Common Council for a zoning map amendment from AR Agricultural Residential to PRD-3. Planned residential development at St. Croix County Tax Parcel 020-1085-30-000 Hearth Development LLC.
Another property, at least we're pretty familiar with, the Atwood property that was recently annexed into the city. Hearth Development is proposing two separate requests here. So along Carmichael Road, you're looking at a B2 zoned proposal, and then transitioning back to a PRD3 zoning criteria, which would include 220 unit apartment complexes. One is indicated to have first floor retail services to serve the neighborhood, and then a 120 unit senior living building. You'll see the specimen concepts in there, as well as a very detailed staff report per section 255-15 of the zoning code. When they make application, we have to bring in the engineers, we bring in for PRD specifically, our planning consultants, everybody that we can, to obviously come up with ultimately what this is a recommendation that if we were to move forward with this, all these items would need to be, satisfactorily addressed. I think, again, to highlight it, you would have you'd have 43 proposed single-family homes on the western side. We found that it is in consistence with our 2009 comprehensive plan. I don't know, we can probably take some time to go through the specific comments as indicated in your packets. If there are if there's certain things in here that you'd like to pull out and go through individually, we could do that too. Mr. Schofield, obviously with SEH, our city engineer, is here to help us on the civil side related to the capital cost study that was done, as well as proposed infrastructure improvements to both Vine and Carmichael, internal development questions, grading, stormwater. We've had a couple meetings with the neighboring residences in the Vine Hills neighborhood, both independently with Jim Weber, the alderperson for this district, as well as with the developer and his representatives. So with that, I know there's people here that would like to speak on this one too. So, I can answer some questions that the commission might have at this point. Other than that, I'd be willing to, throw it out to the...
I have one question.
Sure.
Are they gonna change, that property is kind of a bowl at this point as far as the shape of it? Yeah, there's a knob in it, but it's kind of like a bowl. It looks like on the drawings, everything's flat. Are they gonna raise the elevation of what's there? Or are they gonna lower the, I guess I'm trying to figure out, is this thing gonna stay recessed as it would appear from the roads today? Or is the land levels gonna come up, which is gonna make the buildings look bigger and taller?
So we have, obviously that's more of a preliminary plat discussion, but I think it's valid when you're talking about the height during the zoning, piece too. So, I know that there's an exhibit that was prepared, I think, by the developer that they can share. But it's understood that the area where those apartment buildings would be are still lower than the surrounding topography. With the most recent concept as well, they're proposing raising Vine Street up, basically from the entrance to the lift station to the intersection of Carmichael. So rebuilding that entire road section and raising it up a foot. So, and again, I know there's an exhibit that the developer has prepared to share with us this evening. We did recently just get the preliminary plat. Obviously, that's not what we're considering tonight, but, Dave, you might be able to.
I think to generally answer your question, it's still going to be a bowl. They have the stormwater management they're proposing on site is infiltration for the predominant. So the site itself is going to stay low. It'll be slightly higher than it is right now, but it's not like they're going to raise it up 14 feet and have it be the level of the intersection of Vine and Carmichael.
That's what I wanted to know.
Correct.
Thank you.
Make it bank tonight.
Busy next.
I didn't say it like that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. My name's Nick Vivian again. I represent this project as well. With me, I have Greg Johnson of Hearth Development. A couple of things as we start. So this is the Atwood property. We have Bob Atwood is here as well. This property is located right here along the Vine and Carmichael corridors, and you'll see from your future land use map, the corridor along Carmichael is slated to be neighborhood commercial. The next area here is medium density, and then the additional area is single and two-family homes. So from a comprehensive plan perspective, the Atwood 40 is designated for neighborhood commercial, medium density, and single family. This is the proposed site plan which you have in front of you, so consistent with the city's future land use plan and consistent with everything we know about this site. On the eastern edge, or the eastern border of the property, all commercial lots, all designed to be built as single standalone buildings, no strip centers, individual standalone buildings for individual tenants. On the western edge of the property, or the western side of the property, single family homes, and then single family homes in through the southern mid area with City Park to be dedicated in the center area of the south. And then in the middle of the site, 2 apartment buildings, each with 120 units. You'll see, to answer Commissioner York's question, the pond in the middle is to address surface water runoff, and then the rest of the green space is infiltration space here to ensure that the site is self-containing. From the perspective of what you see here, and from our perspective, we feel that this is an appropriate transition from the existing single family from the west, and certainly consistent with what the city has planned for future lots. Part of this project requires some improvements to the transportation corridor. So there are improvements that are planned, and I think you have the plan sheets for Vine and for Carmichael, which include added turn lanes and added functionality for those corridors, which certainly isn't there at this point. The cost of those improvements, simply the roadway improvements, are $1.5 million, which the developer will be contributing to the project. The additional improvements, the surface water improvements and the other improvements that are required of this site total approximately another $400,000. So your capital cost study requires a contribution of approximately $1.9 million in improvements to this site. So between the land and the improvements, there are a significant amount of dollars that will be invested in this site to make it go. We've met with some of the neighbors and certainly understand some of the concerns that are not inconsistent with concerns from any development project, and even some that we just talked about. Density, traffic, and the like. When we look at this particular corridor, we know that the Vine and Carmichael corridors are busy corridors within the city. We know that there are additional improvements that need to be had with respect to these corridors. You'll know from driving east on Vine Street in the morning that light gets backed up, that people cross the fog line, they get into a lane that doesn't exist to try to turn right, to try to go south on Carmichael. This particular plan adds that turn lane, widens Vine, and ensures that there's greater ability to handle the traffic on that particular roadway. There's also additional space on Carmichael that's dedicated for the future roundabout to the extent that that happens, and turn lanes as well on Carmichael. We also know that on Carmichael at some point there are going to need to be signals that are added. Our plan calls for a signalized intersection between lots C1 and C2 with that signal to provide for traffic calming, hopefully to slow down some traffic and to make that particular area of Carmichael a little more functional than it is today. From the perspective of the pedestrian shed and how folks get through, certainly we have sidewalks that are built through the development. There's also a trail internal which crosses Vine here at the number 5, comes back through, and comes back internally down this road. And the reason for that is because we don't want to have a trail external to this particular development along Carmichael where the speed is 45 miles an hour. So from a pedestrian perspective, this development will allow pedestrians to move north to south through the development and connect this development with the sidewalks and with the rest of the connections in the city. We've heard from neighbors concerns potentially about grading. It's important that, obviously this site is graded appropriately. We understand that this last year with the heavy thaw, there's been water issues with the homes in the adjacent neighborhood. Hopefully development helps that problem, certainly with the site being graded inward as opposed to externally. In terms of the heights of the apartment buildings, the southernmost apartment building is proposed to be 60 feet. The northern apartment building is proposed to be 70 feet. There have been concerns raised by the neighbors about the views and what the apartments might look like from their backyards and from their homes. So we've done some modeling, and I'll pass out an exhibit that we prepared so you can take a look at just what we think the view sheds will be. So what this exhibit shows is the average elevation on the left of a home in the adjacent neighborhood. And then as you move to the east, a single-family, single-story home to be built on, call it lot 12 or lot 13, a roadway, and then a two-story home built on lot 18, 19, or 20, and then the apartment building shown at a maximum of 70 feet height. And what this shows is that with the elevations as built and as planned, that the view of the apartment building at 70 feet is completely obstructed by the single-family homes in the development. And so between there's berming and screening that's planned on the far western edge, and you'll see that here. We intend to keep as much of the wooded area as we possibly can through excavation, but then we plan to plant as well and berm so that there is that additional buffering. And then with the development of the additional homes and with the grade and the elevations from the properties that are located here, you see how the modeling plays out in terms of those elevations. Additionally, there was concern raised regarding the buffering and screening and the distance between these homes and their backyards and the backyards of the homes in the development. We have increased the backyard setback to 35 feet, which staff has suggested would be appropriate and neighbors were appreciative of, with the goal of making sure that there's as much separation as possible between homes and that there's as much privacy as we can possibly gain between homes. With respect to the rest of the site, just in terms of parking, there's surface lot parking. There will certainly be underground parking as well, given your 2-to-1 parking requirements. And I think you've seen the renderings of the proposed buildings. Those are renderings only. They are not site-specific. However, they're the concept that we like at this point. The northern building is proposed to be a little bit higher because on the first floor, we're proposing 1 floor of retail, with then the rest of the building being residential, whereas the southern building is proposed solely to be residential. But it's entirely possible that the ultimate builder of the apartments is interested solely in residential, and that retail component of that northern building may or may not be part of that future plan. But we're showing it as a concept. We like it as an option. We think it's a nice addition that's not part of any product that we have here in the Hudson market, and we think it's a good fit.
Would that retail be open to the general public or just the community?
It would be open to the general public, although your zoning code only allows for neighborhood commercial, so it has to be focused on supporting the surrounding community, although it would be open to the general public.
What's the connectivity to the going west or, going south? I understand one of those roads is the one that'll connect in the golf course. But going west, I see none. If there is one, it's right down on the bottom left.
Like Pine Drive?
Correct.
Is that gonna be the only interface with the existing street layout in that whole quadrant of town?
Yeah, so currently there are no through roads that would otherwise allow us to connect on the western side, because you have a cul-de-sac on Jody Circle, you have a semicircle here with Ruby Road, and this is a cul-de-sac as well. White Pine Drive, we would be happy to put through, except that we don't own all of the land, or we aren't going to own all of the land that would take us to the required right-of-way for White Pine Drive. That southern part is actually on the Gagnon's property. And so the best we can do at this point is provide trail connectivity from this road here and from this hammerhead. And then presumably when the Gagnon property comes in for annexation and for development, one of the requirements will be that road is connected.
The reason I bring the subject up, we already know that that's going to be a very populated area.
Right.
And trying to get out of there will be tougher, without alternate exit venues. And not seeing any made me ask the question. That's why I wish there was something that could be done to help there.
It's a very fair question. Unfortunately, we have a row of houses here.
Yeah, I see that.
We can't get through that row of houses.
Okay.
The only thing I would add with respect to the apartments are all proposed to be market rate. So no restrictions on the northern apartment. Our thought for the apartment on the southern, or on the southern apartment is senior, 55 plus, not assisted living, and not subsidized, simply market rate for that age bracket. But again, that will be subject to whether Greg's group builds the development or builds the apartments, or whether another group comes in and builds those apartments, as to how they want to restrict and market those buildings.
Nick, your commercials lots, do you have tenants? What's the traffic flow for the potentials of who they are going to be as far as traffic count?
Sure. So Greg's been talking with a number of potential prospects. You can speak to them if you'd like, but they're typically lower trafficked professional groups, lower trafficked type businesses. You're going to have, all the entrances are going to be from this road here. Obviously, there's no exit onto, or no entrances onto Carmichael. So all the entrances are going to be from the back. You're going to have plenty of space for parking, and we don't expect that there are going to be any high-traffic users that are occupying any of those spaces. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Understand there are likely to be some comments from the public as well.
Comments? Anybody in the audience have a comment?
My name is Jen Harriet. I live at 621 Diamond Drive. I have a few concerns. I did meet with them last week, along with Mike and Jim Weber. Traffic. Unless, I don't know if I am allowed to ask questions and get an answer. Mike, I know you were going to look into the traffic engineer, but as far as I understand, there hasn't been a traffic study on Vine Street during the school year in 7 years, so not since 2012. There was one during 2018 and 2015, but it was in the summer, and everyone knows who lives anywhere near there or travels to the high school or back, that school year traffic is exceedingly, more increased. That's a major concern. You're talking at least, I would say, a minimum of an extra 800 cars from this development, not including employees or people visiting or coming in and out. And not having that data seems insufficient. It feels rushed that this would be, that there would be a public hearing in 10 days or 2 weeks. And my other concern is obviously the height of the buildings. I understand that the comprehensive plan for the city has a section on housing goals and recommendations, and it specifically states buildings that are out of context with surrounding buildings due to additional size or height will be discouraged. There are no 4 or 5 story buildings amongst residential in the city of Hudson. None that I've done a lot of research and looked. There are none that I know of. And I didn't get to see the model that you showed, but I live on Diamond Drive, which is on the west side of Diamond, and we are elevated. And I can guarantee you I would see a 5-story building over the trees that I look out right outside the front of my house. I feel like it's obtrusive in that spot to have buildings that are that high. There are no other buildings. The closest would be the new Holiday Inn that went in down by Target. This would be, I feel like, just completely out of character for the area. And I've heard it from a lot of people. It feels very Woodbury, and I hate to say that, but it does. Having a mixed-use, multi-level building that looks like that with retail on the bottom, and it doesn't feel like Hudson to me. So yeah, those are, I guess, some of my concerns. And Mike, I don't know, did you get?
Yep, we got it from, do you want to discuss the traffic?
Yeah, so there's kind of 2 parts of this. The DOT obviously has been studying the interchange at Carmichael and 94 for a number of years. There was a traffic study completed for Carmichael itself last year. This development itself has not completed a traffic impact analysis at this point. The improvements that are proposed include a traffic light at Carmichael that would allow full access both north and southbound. Vine Street has improvements in terms of turn lanes and that sort of thing. So there will certainly be additional traffic from this development. The exact nature of that impact on Vine is probably less understood as it is on Carmichael.
Okay. And from what I gather, there is currently a right turn lane. I don't know where that was misinterpreted. There is a right turn line designated on Vine Street heading east. And from what I gather, it would just be extended further west. So it's not exactly an additional lane.
Correct.
Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you.
My name is Donna Rail. I live on Ruby Road, and I just wanted, my concern is also with the traffic. I'm sure we all are familiar with Vine and Carmichael traffic. And this will bring like anywhere from 400 to 600 additional vehicles into the factor of that traffic. They've added extra turn lanes, which help mitigate the traffic that's entering into the development area, but there's really no modifications or alterations for traffic that's exiting and coming back into Vine and Carmichael. So there's some things that are taken into a factor of letting them all come in, but then all of those other 400 to 600 vehicles that are all exiting out into traffic, plus you have the commercial lots that are bringing in traffic also. There's really nothing, there's no difference there. There's no difference in the existing intersection itself. All of the number of lanes are still the same as what's being proposed, as what's currently there. So adding that many more into the factor, plus the number of people coming into the density of that location, and factoring that into our schools, an extra, I mean, just an estimate, 200 to 300 kids into the schools. They were just all re-bordered, and I don't know if any of that was taken into factor, but it just makes the whole situation just unrealistic and unsafe.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Heather Pomeroy, and I'm at 2212 Jody Circle. And my main concern is the accessibility for pedestrians in that corner. I would hope that with this development that the sidewalk continues all the way up to Carmichael. Currently, children walking to the middle school to and from have to walk on the side of the road. In addition, there is no way to get from Carmichael to, say, Culver's. So I'd like to make sure that that is accessible to pedestrians as well. In addition, I have a concern about the increase at going into the Y. There is a lot of traffic going in and out of that area at Vine and Diamond, and for all the people in that neighborhood, and then this potential neighborhood getting across the street to the Y, crossing Vine is horrible. We did put in the blinking pedestrian lights a few years ago. You know, it doesn't help, especially during high traffic volumes such as 5:30, 6 o'clock. So I'd like that to be considered into this whole plan, is just to have it be safe for pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jen Haywood, and I live at 2236 Ruby Road. So I actually abut, I think, 3 of the lots back there. So just to kind of piggyback off their concerns, one is kind of the strain on services of Hudson. It's a pretty densely populated area. I think the public is very concerned about traffic. The public is also very concerned about losing the small town appeal. We understand apartments are definitely needed here, market rate apartments, but 4 or 5 story, even the city of Minneapolis typically doesn't get excited about those. So the other concern is that, is this ultimately desirable? I mean, there's a lot of retail open, there's a lot of apartments open. Are you going to want to move to that single family house abutting, I'm not sure, the commercial unit. So I don't know if that's been, studied as well, but Nick and Greg know my main concern is grading. So my house, and I think Vine Hills as a whole, I'm new to the neighborhood, new to Hudson in September. The grading of Vine Hills is not great. There's a lot of water coming directly onto my property, and I'm hoping, actually, I kind of took your words, and right now I looked today at the GIS map, and the elevation of where the Atwood house was, it's actually higher than where my basement door is. So I see all the water comes down there. So I'm hoping that the development actually can help me, but I'm very concerned about kind of the ground and surface water management of the property, and then working with Greg or whoever ends up developing the house, kind of making sure that development does not flood, because it won't just be my house, it'll be mine plus everything going up White Pine. So I think that's kind of my main concern is that the grading, there's a good grading plan, the ground and surface water management, because like you had said earlier, it is kind of like a bowl. So that's my concern, that it'll all just sit there and not, and I know, I actually did want to ask Nick something. You said Vine Street was going to be raised, because that was my concern this spring. When we got all that flooding, Vine Street was really close to, so that was kind of accounted for. Correct. So that's wonderful to hear. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Sennett, and I live at 2232 Ruby Road, and I'm hoping that we keep the sense of the town of Hudson. I grew up here, down on Buckeye, when it always flooded. And, I hear people talk about the city of Hudson, and I'm hoping we're not going down that road. I have a concern about, from what I understand, my neighbors, you're looking at an apartment that could be as high as 5 stories high, and you are right. If you look where the house was, where Miss Atwood was living, her house was up on a hill. But when you look at the whole sense of the property, it overlooked the property. So that is not really the lay of the land. That was the peak of that land. It is not the lay of the land. It's not a bowl, sir. It might be a little convex, but it's not a bowl. So I really feel that.
I've lived there for all my life, yes it is.
But when you're sitting on Carmichael, you can see the whole flat of the land as you drive by. Well, I just live 300 feet from there. I might know. I mean, I know what you're saying. But again, you're comparing an apartment to the peak of this hill. Then you are what 9/10 of the land is. And I think that was kind of like an unfair assessment. I'm concerned about a 5-story or even a 4-story apartment. There is nothing in that area that's 4 stories or 5 stories high. Everything in that whole area is 2. We're a neighborhood. Can't we keep it a neighborhood? It's the town of Hudson. That's our quality. That's what we look for. I think that there are places in Hudson that you can put 5 stories. I think Press Homes over there against the hillside looks fabulous. You know what? It fits in the hillside. It's tall. It works there. But this is a neighborhood. There's nothing that's more than 2 stories wide. That's why we bought there, that it was 2 stories, and the businesses are only 1 or 2 stories high. I have a concern of listening to you, Nick, about that this is what the builder may do. You're giving him permission to may do something, but I'm not too sure what the may do was. When I looked up the Hart Company, it looked like it was a senior residential, like a Press Homes kind of thing. I'm concerned about traffic that's 24-hour. If they then put in a memory care, if they put in an assisted senior, that's 24-hour professional care, people coming in and out. That's increased the amount of traffic noise of even the 43 homes that you're putting in, the 86 cars, increase, I think, the traffic noise substantially. That you're starting to hear from the highway more in the winter when you sit outside than in the summer. To look at that, to dump into Carmichael that's 45 miles an hour, if you put a traffic light, that will no longer be 45 miles an hour. It'll have to go to 25, which then's going to back up the next backlight, the stoplight, the next one, and there goes exit 2 out of coming off the highway of people trying to get home from the cities. I commute from Minneapolis, or actually just started working from home a month ago, but when I commuted home from Minneapolis, I mean, it's a busy exit 2, and now we're down to 25 miles an hour, because you can't have 40 and slam it on a stoplight. So we're now changed the traffic, not only flow, but also the temperatures of how fast you can go. I guess I'm kind of glad that Grandview has now fixed their streets, because that's going to be the major way to now get to the highway. They'll stop using, it'll change. I think we'll change traffic. I don't think people will use Carmichael and Vine. I think they're going to go down into the other neighborhood now that the street is done, because there's only 2 stop signs there rather than multiple stop lights. So I don't know if Grandview understands how much traffic's going to start going through that neighborhood now, because who's going to go through 5 stoplights when you can just hit 2 stop signs and hit the 94? That's kind of how I already go anyway, just because it's easier. I'm concerned about, we don't have a clue of what's going there, and you're giving him permission to do a high density. That isn't, I don't think, in the culture or the quality of Hudson. I'm concerned about a couple things that you had just said tonight. The turn lane, yep, is already there, and you'll extend it, that's great. But the roundabout, who pays for the roundabout? And that'll be an interesting one there. And the trail, what kind of trail are you putting in your neighborhood? I ride 65, 75 miles a day or a week on my bike. What kind of trail are you putting in the neighborhood, and what's it connecting to?
They need more water.
I mean, it sounds good, but what does it mean?
Sure. Water. Can I address that?
Can he do that? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, I'm
Yeah.
getting the water.
Sure. My name's Greg Johnson, I'm with Heartland Development. So what we're proposing and what we've worked with staff is a couple things. One is we're extending, as the residents had mentioned, extending the current path all the way up to Carmichael. And that's curved and probably a safer alternative than what people have now. As far as through the development, we're going to have a 10-foot wide path running all the way down from north all the way down to the south. And then we're going to have a sidewalk, a pedestrian sidewalk. So we're taking all the traffic out and we're going to get that pedestrian traffic through the development. Does that answer your question?
So you're putting in a sidewalk, and I guess I still don't get the trail concept. I'm sorry.
Well, I guess I consider a trail to be a 10-foot wide, something that's bikeable, walkable versus a pedestrian
So you're-
sidewalk, which would be 5.
And where is the trail in that?
Okay.
The trail that we're proposing here, the 10-foot wide trail, is coming down along the multifamily all the way here, and then again, we're extending this all the way out here and cleaning it up per the city's request. And then there's just going to be what I would call, again, more of a pedestrian sidewalk internally that would handle the residential stuff.
If you look at our comments, obviously, we're getting down into pretty precise things. This is a
Okay,
preliminary
sorry.
master plan. So there's a lot, if you look in the packet, there's a lot of comments here and a lot of things that we have to work through, and I think touches almost every single one of the comments and concerns that are raised. And I think, all of these are going to have to be at least touched on one way or another, and one of those going to, and I guess talking about trails specifically, staff's recommending that 10-foot trail move to the east side, so on the commercial lots. We think that's a better idea, and then have a pedestrian sidewalk, a 5-foot wide sidewalk, if on the apartment side. One of staff's recommendations in the comments was, specific to height. Staff wanted to see some kind of idea of what, the vision shed would be from the average elevation of those homes, along in Vine Hills. And obviously, we received this today, so I know, I don't think anybody's had a ton of time to digest it, but that's, those were the concerns, specific to height. I understand that the proposed structure is tall. I also, I understand that they're talking about partial obstruction via landscaping, homes, things like that. Obviously that's going to warrant further discussion here with this group. Again, you look at all these different things. One of the big things for us as we reviewed as staff was, architectural standards. Do we want the backs of those commercial lots being just, vinyl siding and have all the homes and the, apartments, whatever it be, look at the backside of whatever the business may be that wouldn't be designed, appropriately. We've got some of those instances in town already. Want to make sure that, whatever the multifamily, ultimately, if approved, gets built there, is that it would need to be attractive, with, any number of materials, and, we gave at least a very preliminary look at what architectural standards might look like out there. Getting back to the traffic component, obviously we also share a lot of those concerns. So, but again, a lot of it's touched on in our staff review.
But in the larger question of density again and height.
Yep.
If we pass preliminary approval now, that's saying yes to those issues. That can be that big of, that height of building, right, and it can hold that many people. And I'm not sure that's really in our comp plan and what we want for that site, is it?
It's consistent with the comp plan. from staff's perspective, it is both, city staff as well as their planning consultant in terms of the transition of uses and the ultimate amount of density that is provided in the plan. You can be more restrictive. You can look at, maybe looking at some height restrictions, but from a density standpoint, the densities are appropriate as for what was provided for in the comp plan. That's separate from the height and bulk of a building.
But isn't the response to that they need the height in order to get the density?
I think this is probably a little different of a site. They have more space to work with. It's not a 6-acre site.
It's still a neighborhood. And I think that's the part you're forgetting, that it's a neighborhood. I'm not crazy about having retail underneath the apartment as well. I think that you've got retail along Carmichael, and I understood 10, 11 years ago when I came back in town that that's what was probably going to happen. I mean, I sort of understand that. I don't understand retail underneath apartments just to make it taller and who that's really going to service with everything that's up there. I do have a concern about how much traffic is on Vine Street. I know I've been almost hit a couple of times crossing the street to the Y. I don't even cross, and I love the flashing lights, but it doesn't matter. When people are turning into that Y to pick up their children or whatever, they're just going. If you're in the crosswalk, I've been almost hit a couple of times, and, until recently, I worked in Minneapolis, I know how to step lively across the street and get moving, or just, I stand back and wait for traffic to totally clear before you even start, because not only at 5 o'clock, but anytime on Saturdays as well, it's a pretty tough deal. So it's only going to get worse. And you look at the feeder. I would wish that you wouldn't approve that they would do high density without even knowing what's going in there. I think that does me as a good neighbor and a good steward of, I would ask you to please look at Hudson and what you're doing. We're a town. This is your opportunity to keep it still a town. I think this side of Carmichael should be 2 stories. I think beyond Carmichael going out, there's still some open land and plenty of plots out there that I think you could put higher, that it would work, that wouldn't be in this big, dense area. The county sheriff's just a quarter of a mile down the road, and what goes on if something happens to that location. And man, I just think this is not the place to put it. I think this side of Carmichael should stay neighborhood. I think that's Hudson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michelle DeLong, and I live at 2250 Ruby Road. I've been there for 12 years, and the Atwoods were actually friends of ours. My children have played in their property for years, sledded on that property, enjoyed the wildlife of that property. And prior to this going in my mailbox 10 days ago, I did not even know of the intentions of what was going to go into that property. And there are many concerns that affect that whole neighborhood, many which have been addressed and brought to your attention today. Those 2 large story buildings, yes. I do have a somewhat obstructed view now as I view over that Atwood property. There's trees and things like that. But to put a 4 or 5 story building in that place really does obstruct our view tremendously. My concern is with the amount of traffic that would be brought into that area. Change is inevitable. I know that. 2 120-unit buildings, that's 240 units, multiplied with your 2-to-1 ratio, 480 vehicles just with that, and not with the single-family homes included in there. It is a very busy intersection. I too cross that intersection regularly to go to the Y. I've been honked at, almost run over, had obscene gestures made at me trying to cross that road. Adding that many more cars into that area is a great concern to me, and that's part of that neighborhood feel. Being able to walk to something that is right there across your street. My children didn't even walk to the middle school or the high school because of the traffic, and I highly encourage them to do that. But with so many cars in that area, if the development goes in, all that additional there, I can look out over my windows in the morning, and it is bumper to bumper for over 20 minutes each morning, almost in each direction. My husband drives school bus 2 mornings a week in addition to his other job. He can tell me how long he sits in that traffic each day. increasing the number of people in that area would be a great concern for accessibility to any elementary school, the middle school, and the high school at the various hours. Those buses are coming and going continuously in the morning and the afternoon. Drainage is also a concern to keep in mind too, with all that many people in there. I did have water this year. Mrs. Atwood's driveway was my backyard. Water came in, there was a lot of snow. Granted, the snow won't blow across the field like it did this past winter, but keeping our homes dry is a concern for many of us there. I addressed the height of the buildings, the pedestrian feasibility, the water drainage, and I think just keeping us all in the loop. Retail is a concern. I understand that that's going to happen, but that also brings additional traffic too, from employees, from people shopping, the need of it also in there. Impacting that area is a great concern to many of us that are here tonight. Thank you.
May I ask, what would you like to see go in there?
You know, the single-family homes will be up against my backyard. I have absolutely no concern. And actually, I think apartments can be a good use of that land too. I understand that there's a need for many homes in the area for any kind of a need. That high, sorry, I'm at a loss of words right now. The extra floors, it just seems to lose that neighborhood feel that we are surrounded by. The government center's nearby, it is small. The Y is only a couple of stories tall. Everywhere we look, you kind of have that feel. And I enjoy having that accessibility with sidewalks and pavement where I walk downtown even. I would feel probably less safe with that many cars in that area coming and going. There are times I cannot get into my neighborhood off of Vine the way it is now at certain hours because of the traffic flow. Adding so many additional cars is a great concern for me too. I do need to get to work. I adjust my schedule right now so I avoid those traffic times.
So lower apartment buildings would be okay?
There are people of all needs. They need all different kinds of homes in this area. I can see that. I actually enjoy the fact that there are senior apartments listed in here. Mrs. Atwood was a great friend of ours. We had her for dinner often. I enjoy my children growing up with that also. Having that contact with the older people in our community, the youth of our community, I think it's beneficial to all. Putting these giant buildings in there kind of loses that personable feel that has been in that neighborhood for as long as I've been there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a
My name
question?
is John Stidham. I live at 2104 Chestnut. Most decidedly will not be able to see this structure from my house. I had just a couple questions. You know, as I listen to both these projects tonight, I really feel like the need for a really comprehensive plan for the community needs to be, you know, just all put together. Certainly, the egress and roadways around both these centers seem to be a little bit of a topic, and I really feel like the roadway improvements that are recommended for this site will not even come close to solving the problem that's of an already grossly inadequate intersection, especially with the volume of traffic that goes through there. And my concern is there's an awful lot of ambulatory traffic. There's a lot of kids walking back and forth from middle school and high school in this area, and making sure that they have access safely to and from those. I'll agree that I've seen people nearly get hit a number of times near the Y. People just do not pay attention. So I think we'd have to force the issue with stop signs or stop lights or something. Otherwise, I don't feel like it would be safe for kids. I'd also like to know, I assume that the Planning Commission has looked at some kind of data around the need for certain kinds and amounts of housing in Hudson. You know, so far I've just heard we feel it would, you know, that it would be beneficial for the community. I'm assuming that there's thought going into what I've always been told, an overcapacity water treatment plant. We're talking about a lot of additional housing here, And is there a plan to address that concern? And that's basically, some of my big concerns. Again, I'm not going to really drive by this. I'm not going to interact with that intersection. As a matter of fact, I could, but avoid it because of the traffic all year long. So I guess I just would like to hear if there is some answers around some of those questions. Has the council really considered those questions as well?
So I think we can answer some of those.
Good.
Start with water and sewer. Development of this lot is part of the comprehensive plan. Obviously, everything that's been going on right now is impacting Carmichael. And pretty much everything that's happening right now is impacting Carmichael. But this is part of the comprehensive plan, the development of that parcel, as well as pretty much everything else that's going on right now. I think perhaps with the exception of the dog track was not perceived for the comprehensive plan.
Yes, it was.
Was it
Yes, it
development
was.
there?
Yeah, with Denny.
Okay.
Maybe not at the capacity that will change out there now.
Right.
Because it was a dog track, but it was factored in.
But anyway, so we've had, there's going to be expansion to the sewer capacity, add about another third. We've got a sewage study that was done, and everything that's on the books right now, including Atwood, including the dog track, including Lockney, which is not even discussed yet, including Lee development, we are good over there till the year 2040 is the projection.
Of 25,000 people. We've done a significant more study of our water and wastewater system that's been done probably ever, close to ever in the city of Hudson, just to get a handle of with these growing pains that we have and pressures, can we accommodate, can our infrastructure accommodate it, which was the impetus for the wastewater study, the water study, the Carmichael Road Corridor study, and then, getting back to the, and Mayor, I apologize for cutting in, but getting back to the...
Fred started
it. getting back to the comp plan discussion, yeah, we've got proposals. We're going to be kicking off that comprehensive plan update here this year, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. We're a little bit behind. We've got proposals from firms that have submitted proposals to do that work for us, with us as a community. So that's all going right now, and we are taking a good, long, hard look at these things.
Again, and I'll reiterate what other people have said. One of my biggest concerns is the walkers. We have an extremely high density of, kids who can't drive, and unfortunately, kids who are driving, right in that same zone. And how many staff people go into those two schools. It's just a really lot of traffic there, and I feel like that Carmichael intersection, which most people avoid if they can.
I would say, so we're, and some of the concerns, obviously all the concerns are very real. Some of the concerns have been either dealt with or they're not an issue for us going forward for some foreseeable time. Traffic, there's no question, is a very big concern of ours, especially on Carmichael and Vine. There's no doubt about that, and some of the other things. I hearken back, you guys may remember, when we were discussing the Lee property. Would have been nice if everybody in the room had been here for that discussion, because everybody that came in that was opposed to the development of the Lee property thought the Atwood property was a perfect place for everything that's happening down at Lee. Is that right? You remember that? They were testifying that the Atwood property is perfect for this. But anyway, so no, I truly understand the concerns and respect that. Mary Claire.
So what was the discussion at the council level when this property was annexed by the city council? What was the discussion about what you thought it might be?
At what time, what year?
Well, but when, you made the decision to annex it in, so what was the conversation around that?
There have been
what the use would be used for?
Different iterations based upon the different potential purchasers of the property. So single family was big, I think, in the previous iteration.
It was I think the only different was the development proposal that we based our capital cost study off of and our budget analysis off of is this plan minus building footprints for the multifamily. It had 2 multifamily pads in the middle. We didn't necessarily know the densities at that time specifically.
The Atwood property's been planned for annexation for, it's been known by the city that when that land came up for sale, it would become part of the city. So the city council had planned on that for a long time, longer than most people have been here. When it did happen, you know, it was already preliminary viewed as commercial and residential. This was in the 2009 master plan. If you go back to that date, you will see that. So all the thinking on that, and of course the ramifications of all the issues that are brought up today are stuff we've been thinking about, worrying about. What are you gonna do with, you know, Carmichael's the easy one to fix because it's already been proposed to go out to 4 lanes with that one. What do you do with mine? Mine's more constricted. So yes, we realize those problems exist. We don't want to ruin the city any more than anybody that's been here. I do have to put a little salt on a few people. Things change. Nobody wants their neighborhood ever to change from what it is, myself included. I'm not trying to pick on you. So when you see this come next to you, especially if you didn't know it was coming, it's a real bop on the head. And I have sympathy for it, but it was coming. Sorry you didn't know. But I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, but the bigger concern is that we address what's coming.
Absolutely.
And that goes right back to traffic, that goes right back to how tall the buildings do we allow? So, I mean, what I have, a note that I have here, I mean, the development, or the developer is addressing basically from the pump station east. Well, if we're going to dump this many more cars, I'm not saying it's on the developer, but as a city, we need to look at all of Vine Street, you know, west. Because I live right by where all these people live. Good luck getting out in the morning. And that's without this development. And, you know, what Jen said, the study has been done in the summer.
It's old.
Well, it could have been done last summer. I don't care. When it's school year, it's 100% different.
What I will say, though, that I haven't said earlier, that I think is a bit of a surprise to some of the people that have been around here, Pat, is when all this stuff was preliminary on the master plan as even developable, you know, I mean, multi-unit and things like that, what we're seeing now is the capacity of what people want to put on these lots is much more than I think we ever envisioned, to be honest with you. And I mean, I'm not saying that to be rude or against anybody, but it was never envisioned that, you know, it'd be a 150 unit building instead of 70.
Or 5 stories.
Or 5
We've got
stories.
nowhere else in the community with that kind of height.
Right. So
Other
that's
than
the
Presbyterian
curveball to all of us here, is those are the curveballs.
I can't support that going in that development. I don't
Yeah,
think
so you
I don't
have
think it
this-
fits with anywhere else in Hudson.
You have
I don't
this height
think it
study.
fits with what we were trying to do when talking, I was on that 2009 Planning Commission.
Absolutely.
I don't think that's in keeping with what we've been trying to do out there and trying to do in other neighborhoods around this community at all. I can't support that kind of height.
Yeah, so you have this height study that talks about the houses that basically abut the development.
Correct.
The houses further away sit higher and will look straight at a 5-level house.
Well,
And I mean,
it'll
you
look at it
studied
from
that, I
Carmichael.
get it. Because that makes sense, it's right next door. But go about 3 houses away, 4 houses away, and the impact is more.
And we have to look at it from every other angle. I mean, it's gonna be two big ash buildings in there. I'm sorry, but there's nowhere else like that in this community. That it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't fit. And I'm sorry, they may need that kind of density to justify the price of the property in order to make it fit. But that's not our problem.
But you know, Pat, to take that one step further, it's not just setting 2 houses in a neighborhood that already, or 2 big apartment buildings, sorry. in an existing neighborhood, you're actually setting it into a new neighborhood. Those little houses are gonna look really strange sitting next to these two big buildings. You know, there's no buffer there. It goes from single family to 5-story.
There are a few things I'd like to address. You know, first, with respect to the density, the purchase price of the property is a component. But for any developer to come in to develop this 40-acre parcel, the city's going to require a contribution of $2 million, right? And so I'm sure there are developers that would love to come in and develop this 40 acres as only single-family homes. But it's not reality when it's a $2 million contribution to the city's infrastructure plus the real estate, and so there needs to be some density there. And so you say, well, what kind of density can be there? Our only guide is to look at your comprehensive plan to say, what did the planners envision this property to be used as? And how did the city envision this property to be used? And so we look at that plan to say, okay, neighborhood commercial, medium density residential, single and two-family residential. And so we plan for that, and we utilize those densities that are contained within your comprehensive plan. And your staff has analyzed those densities both through the capital cost study and through an analysis of density. And your staff has said, if you want to develop this with the density is fine, it's acceptable, and here's the price tag to do that. We're not asking for anything that's inconsistent with what the city planners have envisioned.
We've never envisioned a 5-story building there.
But in terms of density, you have to take out the structures for a second, and you have to think about the densities in terms of what we're moving forward and asking for. Now, we'll talk about the buildings in just a second. But in terms of those densities, that's what you plan for on the corner. Now you say, we've never permitted a building of this size. We're not asking for something outside of what your ordinances call for. Your ordinance says in this particular district, you can have a building that's 75 feet high. We didn't come in asking for two buildings that were 75 feet high. One of the buildings is proposed to be 60 and one is proposed to be 70. We didn't make up the numbers. We didn't make up the heights. And I understand that this is different than what's been permitted previously. But all we can go off of is your code, and oftentimes we disagree with what your code says. But we're bound by your code, and unless your code changes, that's what we're required to follow.
Then we don't have to change to PRD 3 to accomplish this.
What do you mean?
Well, you're asking to increase our density on it.
Right now, as this property came into the city, it sits with an ag res zoning classification. It has to be zoned as something. And so PRD 3 is the overlying zoning classification that allows us to mix uses and to have single family and multifamily.
A question I would have then is, if we're going to do a comprehensive plan and spend the money to do all that, what are we doing our comprehensive plan about or around? There's nothing left in the city to develop, basically.
It's a good question, but it's required by law.
Well, so should we be acting at this time to make the decisions on that piece of property before that new plan is done?
That's a long ways out by the time that plan will be done.
But this is going to have a tremendous impact on forever on that whole section of our community. In effect, everybody in the community who's already here.
I just feel it's so over and above what the initial planners even thought of, that it's overwhelming. It's more than, even though it was designated as such, some of these you know, the first exposure Hudson had to the first-story retail, company out of La Crosse came up and did it with a couple of senior housings. It subsidized the rent. We loved it. We loved it. Now the concept has gone, but it's not subsidizing anything. And now it's gone 2 stories higher. And so we're seeing all this, but it's all changing. It's putting more into the 5-pound bag.
But it's not going 2 stories higher because we're asking to do something outside of your zoning code.
Yeah, but
It's
that's
keeping.
if they give that code designation.
Right, I understand, right, and it's in keeping with the density,
Right.
and it's in the structural height that the city allows, and so
And that,
it's a challenge. Growth is challenging. We know that and we understand that. Every time I stand up here, everybody says we want market rate apartments, but to the mayor's point, they're better off on somebody else's property. Because of the density, because of the location, because of the traffic, there are any number of different reasons that it's better someplace else.
That, by the way, that wasn't my point. That was the people that was arguing against.
So I understand that to that comment, but the reality is when you look at the comp plan, your housing goals and recommendations for medium density housing includes to encourage innovative zoning and land use approaches for the development of diverse and affordable housing for persons of all ages, and to promote mixed-use housing options along key corridors within the city to allow for higher densities within these corridors. Well, that's what we're trying to accommodate. We hear the needs of the community. We understand that there are needs for market rate apartments. We understand that this is a key parcel of land to be developed within the city. And from a financial perspective, there's an investment that's required to be made with the city in order to develop this parcel. And so you bring all of these different aspects together, and what you try to do is you try to plan for a community that incorporates that comprehensive plan to say commercial, medium density, single family. That's exactly what you have here in front of you with this site. And I understand it's challenging to look at the size of the building and to say, we don't have that here. You're right, we don't have that here, principally because in the past, your parking restrictions, your parking ordinance has been so restrictive that it's been nearly impossible at a 3-to-1 requirement for anybody to develop any new apartments. That now has changed to a 2-to-1 requirement, and so it's now possible to build a little bit differently. And so you have a proposal, and I think Greg's done a great job in trying to follow the comprehensive plan and the intention to say commercial, medium density, single family. And really what you have to do is you have to envision the transition across the site, because that's what your comprehensive plan calls for, and that's why I started with that point to say we're really trying to stick to your plan, your long-term plan for this property that's been envisioned for so many years.
I think the hard part, I mean, there are a lot of issues with this plan and a lot of concerns. And then, so on the one hand, they are addressing everything that we have in our current code and ordinances, right? With what has been laid out?
After we go through,
Right.
you know,
Right.
all of our comments.
No, I know. So, I mean, that's hard. It's a huge change for the area, which I get. It's a totally different look that we don't have anywhere else. I will say, we have sat at this table and said we need market rate housing, because not everyone can afford a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 home. We have heard from businesses and others that they need employees, that, you know, we've heard that city staff can't live in town, that teachers can't live in town, that those that work at manufacturers can't afford to live in town. This is, I mean, that's the huge challenge. Is this the ultimate plan that we want to have this area look like? I don't know. There are a lot of issues with it, you know, that have been raised, but they're also following the current guidelines that we have set out. And I think that's a huge challenge.
It is, and we have, going back to Fred's point, that a lot of a lot of what we're seeing currently is kind of overwhelming, and may not have been what people that were doing comprehensive plans in the past had in mind. We have, consistent with that conversation, also asked ourselves, what do we want Hudson to look like? And here we are, you know. I mean, that's something that we've posited that question kind of rhetorically here, and I guess we're kind of hit smack in the face with it now. But I mean, we need to figure that out. And
Which is what I still believe the comprehensive plan is important, because there is opportunity in other parts for redevelopment in the area. There's a whole riverfront study, there's a whole TIF district downtown, so there is a need to do that.
well, there you go.
No, I do, I think.
Yeah, I just can't support it.
Doing the comprehensive plan?
No, I can't support this. I can't
No, but
support.
there is a need for a comprehensive plan.
There's a need for a comprehensive plan.
Okay,
I
I
would
just-
say, personally, put this off until after that, if we're gonna spend all that money to do it. There's been lots of opportunity to have sold the property and developed it before now. There will be in the future. We only have one opportunity to get it right. We live with the mistake forever. That's just the way I feel about it. I'm sorry.
Are there any other comments? Anybody that would?
Sure. I'll try to be short here. So I can appreciate what you're wrestling with. I really can. I'm a little disappointed to hear some of the discussion, because we came before you in February for an annexation request with the same plan that we're showing. Perhaps not the density or the height or some of the things we're talking about now, but we did come to you with this plan. And it would have been good to have some of these discussions perhaps at that time, whether appropriate or not, to know where you guys were at. The challenge we have, as Nick stated, is we're being asked to support a lot of work around that area that would improve what is there right now as far as infrastructure for the city. And that, quite frankly, is driving some of the density requirements of this project. It just is math. So you can look at it and say, well, you know, do townhomes or do something else. Okay? This project is going to provide a really solid tax base for the community to continue to improve its infrastructure. We can have a discussion, is 4 stories more appropriate than 5? But again, we get back to what are the costs of the project. So when you say there will be more development, there will be more developers, I'm sure there probably could be. But what we're trying to propose here is a mixed use that provides some housing for perhaps people in their mid-50s and 60s that would like to retire and maybe travel a little bit, and give them a place that they can be, which would in turn open up some of the single-family housing, perhaps that is more affordable, that they just haven't been willing or able to move out of. So we're trying to address that. The market rate, I think, has been talked about quite a bit. I don't hear any discussion really with the single-family, so assuming that kind of layout that we have there is adequate. And then the commercial just makes a lot of sense with the traffic you have, the fact that you had mentioned that it will go to 4 lanes at some point, makes some sense there, that the commercial is there to buffer that residential as you go forward. So we can have the discussion about what is an appropriate height. But again, at some level, it just isn't economically feasible, and that's what we're trying to weigh here that makes some sense. So, thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Can I talk again?
Sure.
Sorry. Do I have to say my name and everything
Please.
again? Okay. Jen Harriet, 621 Diamond Drive. I just wanted to say one thing. I noticed that you did read a part of the comprehensive plan that obviously it's 10 years old now, which is why you guys are working on a new one. But 4 bullet points down from the one that you read does say define standards to regulate the bulk, height, area, and density of buildings in new residential areas to create consistency with existing residential neighborhoods. And to me, that absolutely does not match the comprehensive plan. And I think our our thing too. We obviously all know in the neighborhood, or people who I've talked to, we know this is going to get developed. Something is going to go there. And we're not against apartments. We understand there's a need. There's 3 apartment buildings that were on the agenda tonight. It's the height and the look, which changes everything about the whole plan and the feel, you know? So I guess that's the biggest concern.
Thank you.
I know it's late. Jen Haywood, 2236 Ruby Road. Jim Weber couldn't be here tonight, but I think something he said about this development was, again, we all knew it was going to get developed. Nobody's anti it. Was that maybe we could work with you guys for it to be more of a village look instead of a Woodbury-esque. I know that's kind of the term everybody on Facebook said about this development. We're turning into Woodbury. So Jim Weber and I, and when we met with you guys, was maybe this could be a more village look to give it more of that character to fit within the neighborhood. So,
thank you.
Donna Rail, 2234 Ruby Road. Could I just throw a suggestion out there, a proposal to maybe wait for the next comprehensive plan, and while that's being prepared, while that's being assessed, we'll give time to prepare the infrastructure, the streets, the roads, the capacity to accommodate anything with such a high density that might be approved at that time. Thank you.
Bob? Yeah.
First question, I'm Bob Atwood. First question I have, is there a way to unanex a property?
I beg your pardon?
Is there a way to unanex a property? This is creating so much problems.
I don't know.
I'm serious. I mean, this has just gotten, Greg has bent over backwards to try to help this thing along. I mean, he's contributing $2 million to help with the streets, sewer, water, everything else. This has all been discussed before tonight, and all of a sudden now it's, oh, I'm not gonna back a deal like this? We've never had this type of discussion before. You know what? Minneapolis never had the hype list. Yeah. They have either, so. Things change. Yeah, it's gonna get developed. Maybe what's that senior citizen housing over there by the hospital? You telling me that's 2 stories or 3 stories? No, that's the only other place that exists in town. Okay, so it is here.
Yeah, the other side.
I'm sorry, the freeway. How do you suppose those people felt? How do you suppose those people felt? No, that is neighborhood right
Can we have the conversation with us, please?
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. So my question, going back to my original question. We have a deadline on this property. We can't sit on it forever. We sat on it for 5 years, trying to find a buyer that would be willing to buy and go along with all the things that the city has already assessed against it. I'm just looking for an answer. Can it be unannexed? Is that what you want?
I don't know.
That question. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, we don't know. I imagine if somebody else, if the town wanted to come in and annex it, I don't know about, I've never been through that. I don't know about, and I don't know that there's anybody here that's saying that they don't want it developed. I mean, we've been waiting for this for a long time, and it has been, it is part of the comprehensive plan, has been for a long time. Everybody has been under the assumption,
well, it's been
most
there since
everybody's
before 1990.
Yeah, everybody's been under the assumption that that piece of property is part of this, it has always been part of the city of Hudson. So.
It seems to me that if you really want it, that maybe we have a little bit of forgiveness or a little bit of negotiating. But I, for one, I'm tired of dealing with relatives. And if I had been smarter, and if I had been a lot smarter, I would have negotiated some senior citizen living for myself with Greg, but I didn't do that. But I'm going to throw it out there. I don't know. It's real frustrating for me to sit here tonight and hear all this stuff after we went through the whole annexation. Nobody said anything then.
Well, it wasn't brought up. The 75 feet
Well, a lot
was
of it
not
was.
brought up.
There was a preliminary out there, wasn't there?
And we never dreamed that whatever that PR3 or whatever it is, PRD3 plan, you know, I don't memorize that stuff. I don't know
Yeah, I'm
what
sure
it-
you don't, but
But anyway, so.
I know from forever that it's been single, multifamily, and commercial.
Right, I guess if it was me right now, I'd say, well, we need to look at it and maybe change that designation to a lesser one that's not quite as high. I don't know, but that's what I'm thinking.
You better.
I just want to ask a question, just so I'm clear on one point. Does the commission have a concern regarding the density that we've proposed, or is the primary objection or the primary concern at this point the height of the apartment
They
buildings?
go hand in hand.
Well, they're different questions.
I have a concern with the density because of the traffic that goes straight west on Vine Street. So
what are you saying? You think you could put 3 buildings in there at a lower height?
I'm trying to figure out which question we're really trying to address. The density for the property is the density for the property. We're not asking for any deviations from density. Understand that you have flexibility in terms of what's, as to how you condition the height of buildings. So if the concern is you're building 2 buildings that are too large, well, we'd like to know that so we can try to address that concern. If the concern is you're trying to site too many units, I'm not sure we can do anything about that because the density of the property for this 40-acre parcel is the density that's permitted by your comprehensive plan and your zoning code. So I kind of want to zero in, or I want to try anyway to zero in on what the primary concern is so that we can work to at least address and respond to the primary concern.
It would be height in my mind, but I can't see how you can achieve your density by reducing the height. In other words, it's all square feet. How much fits in square feet? And if you take 2 feet off of, or 2 stories off of it, you're down to 3 stories. How can you get the same amount in that same space? And the answer is you can't. So yeah, it's affected by height.
I understand that piece, but are you concerned about the number of units on the site specifically?
Height. That's me.
You said height. Yeah, I'm more height than number of units.
So Mike, are you looking for action then under second page? So I mean, are we looking for a motion under one of these 3 considerations?
Making a noise here, but actually.
Go ahead.
We're looking for some type of action here, yes.
So just so that I'm clear, Mike? Yep. Right now, it is ag residential.
That's the default that comes in.
Question is to rezone it to PRD 3, which PRD 3 is what
and B2.
allows for.
Correct.
Or PRD 2, did you say?
PRD 3 and then B2 for the commercial. They're 2 separate requests. Yep. So we're still on the first item, but they're all, I mean, it all ties together, obviously.
So if I read the 3rd consideration under postponement, then this issue would be forwarded directly to the Common Council?
Because they'll still have, again, same thing with the public hearing,
Yes.
right? So we provided notice, the public hearing will go on, the council will hear the concerns for and against, and, it'll be forwarded on without a recommendation from the council.
Exactly. You could have a motion to forward this directly to the council without a recommendation.
But that, in our past experience, has not really
That's
gone
not
very
worked out
well.
well for us in the past.
No, what has not worked out well for us, we did forward something with a recommendation and they didn't take that.
Oh,
But it's
There was a recommendation.
you're right.
Yes.
It's better for us to, I'm sorry. It's better for us to have a recommendation that moves forward to the Common Council
Yes.
than not to have a recommendation. So I guess I'm sorry, can't hear. What is the consensus that we can come to tonight?
Short term, I'll stick my neck out and say I'm gonna move to deny the reclassification to the new, whatever they're asking for, the PRD 3 and B2 until I move to deny it for tonight. not forever, but tonight. I don't
Why
deny.
wouldn't you postpone it?
Well, then, postpone it then. That does the same thing.
There's an awful lot of questions that I think need to be flushed out. I am too concerned about the traffic and the safety. I'm also concerned about the height. They go hand in hand. I'm not opposed to the project. I want to see it developed. I don't want you to take it out of annexation.
Nope.
I was here when we did the first comp plan, 2009. We didn't envision the big, that's just moot point. We need to figure it out. We need to make a decision. Do we want the develop to happen out there? So we as a body, this commission, need to recommend yes or no. And what does it look like? They're only asking us to rezone right tonight.
Correct. And approval of that preliminary master development
Let me
plan.
change my proposal, then I propose to postpone it until we can do further review. Postpone the reclassification of this till further review.
I just think that makes sense, and I'll second that because there's so much that you staff have recommended that need to be flushed out.
So then it still moves forward then with a public hearing on the 17th?
Yeah, we provided notice. The public hearing has been set. Council has set a public hearing. It will have to take place.
So will the council move on this with the postponement by this body? So will they deal with it, or will it come back to this body?
Theoretically, they could just do it.
Yeah.
I mean, they make the final choice.
And is that what we want?
We are a recommendation. That's it.
But ultimately, this is the planning body of our city.
Right.
It's been set in a comprehensive plan that is in the works of being redone. We're the ones that recommend what we want, the vision we see. Now, what we're hearing is the vision is too big. We need to address the traffic issues, which we're going to, which the developer's helping us do as well. So we need to figure out that piece.
Right, but sending that to the common council then would not allow this group to work further on that, if I understand it right.
Unless they send it back.
Unless they say, okay, we listened to the public hearing and then don't take action.
They could not pay any attention to us.
They could not pay any attention to us, but I think there'd be a price to pay on their part for not having done so, given what is taking place in the meeting tonight and what the citizenry is saying.
I think they're listening. I think we're listening. I think they will listen to what your recommendation on it. Now, I'm going out on a limb there.
Well, just speaking for myself, when we met on this and annexed it and voted on annexing it originally, and we talked about single-family, multifamily, commercial, and some larger buildings with a higher density, I didn't expect the size of those buildings to come back in. So that, to me, is a big shocker, even though it may fit the density.
Yep. Let's just to I think it's gonna help if we forward on more to the council, perhaps, some more than just, for further study. I think that's good, but I want to define what that means.
Further study around major concerns regarding
I know, but
traffic.
I know, I just want to detail those out, so it's part of the actual part of your, motion.
Impact on Vine Street, just all the things that were brought up today that I think we know are gonna be problems that, again, we have to thank the developers because they're willing to jump in and fix a bunch of this stuff with us.
But then we need to articulate, what are those things? So what are they?
Right, because as I go back, Pat's statement is right, we can screw it up and everybody else has gotta live with it forever. I don't wanna do that.
Right, so what are the specific items that we want to articulate?
Traffic height.
In density would be the three major.
All right.
Would they not?
I mean, I think
Is that okay to your motion, Jim?
Yeah, and then I'd also say connectivity with the rest of the city. I mean, having one access or two, the access points to that whole thing are lousy. I mean, excuse me, you got 40 acres there with one or two ways in and out of it.
Well, they're landlocked.
I understand that, but I mean, it is a concern. Is there any way to do it?
But
It's a
then
question. It's a question.
Maybe the other point is how it fits within the context of the neighborhood.
Okay, that's good. No, I mean, that says it well.
That's absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, my hope is that this will still come back to this body.
And
So add all that stuff to.
And that's all, I think everybody, I think that they'll hear that, the council will, again. When we approach this, obviously, I think as Nick alluded to, or I know, is the developer bears, and the way we've always done things in Hudson is you pay as a developer. If you want to develop here, you're
Pay to play.
You pay to play. So the question becomes, is, if we're looking at scaling things back then too, and now I have to go back to, and I'm happy to do this, it's my job, but to go back and negotiate with the developer and say, okay, we have all these costs identified in the capital cost study. Is the city, it's a larger discussion at the city level from the council, is are we willing to take on some of those costs right now as a city to see this property develop?
Speaking on myself as a District
And I don't mean to
1.
look at you.
No. I would support us in some capacity also helping with the traffic in both Carmichael and Vine Street.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
From that perspective is,
Well, it's a city issue already.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I would agree.
It's not
with you.
new.
It's not just their problem.
So obviously there's implications on that, hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially that, and I'm not saying that I'm opposed to this, because I'm not necessarily, but, was that a bond? Was that what does that look like? A TIF? I don't know. Obviously, the current owner that's owned the property forever is on a deadline, so, we're gonna have to move relatively quickly too. I think it's out of respect for their family and, and doing that.
I agree. I mean, it's shame on us if we can't
Right.
satisfy this development. And for him to say that, that's the first time I've ever in 14 years heard somebody want to be taken out of annexation. And that's pretty embarrassing.
So I'm just trying to identify the framework to which to begin this.
Well, the other
negotiation.
comment that I want to make note of, and I've heard this said for years and years, we don't want to look like Woodbury, we don't want to look like Stillwater. We watched these two guys mess up their cities, and if we haven't learned from them, shame on us.
Is it, and then again, are we talking 4 stories? Talking what is, I don't know.
Well, Mary's right in trying to nail you down. Be specific. What is it? And it's the issues we brought up. In this
I
case,
think it's
due to
the context of the neighborhood.
Excuse me?
Context of the neighborhood?
Context of the neighborhood.
Well, yeah, I mean, Hudson's a neat little cohesive town, old river town, lots of history and all that stuff. And do we just want to have Targets and Walmarts here and all that kind of stuff? So it's not, we've lost, I mean, how many family-owned businesses do we have left? Mueller Tube Hardware, gone. All these places are gone, all just gobbled up by the corporations. And I mean, as a local resident, it's killed me to see that happen, see all these people disappear. How many, you go into restaurants now and you see the same ones in each town. I mean, doesn't that drive you crazy?
The geography of nowhere.
All right, I think we have a great variety of restaurants. Okay.
We do, but you know what I'm
I'm
saying.
going to call for the question if we're done discussing.
Anyway, I'm done talking, so.
All right, there was a motion and a second. Has that been amended at all, or?
I changed it to postponed, and then with the conditions that we have brought up, in this conversation for Mike to pass on to the city council, which I hope you've made note.
Got that, Tiffany?
And Randy seconded it.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Same thing for Jay?
Yep. Should I make the motion?
Yep.
I move to postpone. Same issues and concerns as the first one. What else?
Traffic height and density.
You're right. Oh, that's what I meant by same issues.
Same motion.
And neighborhood feel, yep.
Context.
Back to the neighborhood.
Context of the neighborhood.
Context of the neighborhood.
Yeah. Second, somebody.
Second.
Motion second.
And I just want to know that, I think we can work with this developer. Nick, you've always
I
been
do too.
good. So I think we can work this out,
I do too.
I do.
so everybody's happy. As soon as we can.
We're trying to do that. No, we're trying to do that.
All right.
We're trying to do it.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion's approved. Item K, discussion and possible action on final development plans for Luther Chevrolet expansion and site improvements at 1220 and 1250 Crestview Drive, the Luther Company LLP.
So Landform, on behalf of the Luther Company, has submitted final plans for building
Tiffany, can
expansion.
you speak up, please?
Wait a second until they get out here.
Yeah. So Landform, on behalf of the Luther Company, has submitted final plans for building expansion and site improvements. The applicant has taken ownership of the adjacent lot at 1250 Crestview Drive and has included the site in their expansion plans. The plans provided include existing site demolition, civil site, lighting, and seating landscape plans. Staff is recommending approval with the listed conditions.
Can we make them take down that old pole sign right away, though?
Make them take down what?
The old pole sign that's on that existing property. That's a joke.
Oh,
Kind
sorry.
of true.
Oh, okay.
I'll move to
Joking, but you're
approve.
not joking?
We got a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Excuse me, does that include the
Motion
condition?
second.
No, with the conditions that the city staff have
Thank you.
placed in place.
Motion second. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion's approved. Discussion possible action on concept development plans for 3rd Street Living at 614 and 620 3rd Street, DPB Investment Partnership.
This project, the developer proposes a, Lars, do you want to run through the project, or do you want me to give a brief overview? Okay.
I'll add to it.
Sure, thanks. So, the owner currently owns the 2 single-family homes on the property and proposes to redevelop it to a 23-unit, 3-story apartment, a market-rate apartment complex. Access to the property would be from the private alleyway off of Vine and off of Locust. The applicant was granted a variance for a reduction in setback for the parking stalls immediately along the east wall, with some bollards as a condition to,
What's he doing here?
we require parking stalls to be at least 10 feet away, and they were granted a variance by the Board of Appeals, so that has been approved.
Yes.
The building itself, like I said, is 3 stories tall. It's approximately 39 feet and a half feet tall, so it's not overly imposing from a height perspective, like we talked about on the
Right.
previous application. They include a dry stack stone material on the main elevation that faces 3rd Street. Some increased landscaping, a quitclaim deed to meet your setback requirements on the south side of the property, and some additional landscaping. Staff's recommending that we move forward with the concept plan approval, subject to, obviously, any engineering and staff comments.
So just out of curiosity, the height of the building matches the abutting building, right?
You can,
What was the question, Mary Claire?
I couldn't hear it either.
Would you speak up, please?
It's getting
Billy?
late.
I can't hear very well, so.
Sure, my apologies. I had a question. Oh, yes, thank you. Does that, just because height seems to be a topic tonight, does this match similar to the height of the next door building?
Yeah, it's actually the exact same height.
Perfect, love it, very good.
I was at the appeals meeting, and yes, the setback was approved. They do have adequate amount of parking spots. They own the adjacent building, which does not, which I don't know if it's fair to even say that at this meeting, but.
Nope.
Okay, then it's off the table. But I do have questions on the access to the lot, because they're proposing underground parking, which from the prints I've seen, eliminates some of their above-ground parking. And then the alley coming in between Alano and Nick's is not 2 lanes wide, it's 1 lane wide, which we had this letter from Alano tonight, if you guys read that.
It was the same one in the variance pack.
In the,
Same letter.
And
Oh,
so I guess alls I want to hear is that, you know, the access issues have been rectified.
Yes, we're gonna, it's in the process right now to get an easement across. The parcel apartment that's to the south has direct access to Locust. And the parcel that we're talking about has access to the north. So it's an access, and so what we're doing with the 2 parcels, we're gonna interchange it so you can drive through. And that's in the process of being resolved right now, so.
But what's going to happen to those parking spots along the eastern border of the first building then? Is that going to lose those spots?
No, there's still a drive access there. We had talked about this
I know
before,
that.
that I am going to improve the circulation.
Okay. You promised.
Yes, I
I
did.
remember.
I will. It will be.
And it is
But
concept.
like we said, we can't talk about the parcel to the south. So,
These aren't
That's why I
final.
said it, because I brought that up, and it's
Right.
not fair.
but
And again, these aren't final development plans yet, so we're, you know, those are things that Lars will have time to sort through,
Step back up.
you know, prior to the final approval, right?
right.
I will move to approve then with any standing conditions or anything like that, but if there are none, I will move to proceed or approve.
and I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Is there anybody in the audience who hasn't had anything to say yet tonight that would like to talk?
I have some samples of what the building's gonna look like.
Look at Miraz in the back, he's still here too.
Yeah, what's Mike doing here?
Is your car not working tonight, or are you looking for a ride?
Is it extra hours for Mike?
It's Dwayne Bakke, you know, I know everybody here. It's come up several times, and I honestly don't know the answer to this. Alano, now apparently you have a letter from Alano, okay? I don't know what the letter says. However, Alano, I don't know if they have access into their property. That the road off of Vine, we have the access from the people that used to own the filling station or whatever it was, the auto repair. So we have access into our properties, okay? I don't know that Alano has ever asked for that access. So they're on our street. They're on our access. And somebody should get to Alano.
Changes things.
Well,
It changes things.
well, I'm sorry. The very first meeting I had with the city, I brought that up. That I said, this could be an issue that Alano should be addressing.
Because they don't understand it that way. Yeah.
Well, I just want to get it on the record so that we get it straightened out so it's right for everybody. And maybe that means widening that alley or doing something, or maybe Alano has to do their own driveway. I mean, that's kind of a city issue. I don't know what the right answer is, guys.
It's hard because it's a, you know, and it's a private drive, right?
Yes.
It's not a public alleyway.
Right.
So what you're dealing with here is essentially a property line dispute issue, correct?
Well, it's not a dispute as far as I'm concerned.
No, sure. No, I hear what you're saying, and I don't. I'm not saying I disagree, but you know,
It just should be resolved for the good of everybody.
Yep.
Now, if that means that someone brought up it's only 10 feet wide, maybe Alano adds another 10 feet on their side.
So is this something so what's the action item with that?
Has to do with this. I think it's part of.
This is part of the being on the record
right.
from
Yeah,
the
part of
other.
So you'll figure it out.
Yeah, we get that panned out before the end. Yeah.
Very good.
All right, any other,
The parcel has been surveyed, just so you guys know.
any other discussion?
And all the variables are
Are
attached
known.
and everything.
Further
No, no, you're
discussion?
saying they're all known.
Okay.
Call for the question.
Any further
Give me that
discussion?
look.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. It's the benefit of going last, Glenn. I was right on that.
I move to adjourn.
Second that.
Can I,
Got a motion, a second. Oh, wait a second.
Excuse
Just
me.
a whole fresh new topic.
Oh, no.
Agenda. Something you want to have on the agenda in the future?
yes.
Okay.
So can we just talk about the riverfront study and maybe consider putting a committee together or something to help move that process forward? That's,
The,
We have a committee, and we did the study.
right.
Pat's on it.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you meet or I just,
We're just, it's just trying to come together and coalesce.
okay. So can that be known when you meet or?
Yeah, I'm not chairman of it, but I.
Oh, okay. Who's
I don't-
chair?
it's a Secret, I don't know.
Probably the mayor.
Mayor?
All right, very good. That's all I have.
All right. Any other, what, comments, announcements, anything? No? All right, all those in favor? Oh.
We have an intern.
That's
Oh, you waited until now? We had a packed house.
Every meeting is like this.
This is Olivia Neef. She's our intern for the summer.
Hi, Olivia.
Dear packet when you're done.
She joins us from the University of Duluth.
Okay, UMD.
Dilute?
Excellent. Well, I apologize. Had I known that, I would have introduced you at the very beginning or somewhere in between.
And obviously, with all the stuff we've got to deal with right now, all the help is very
Every
greatly
night is like
appreciated.
this. No, I'm
Good to have you on board, Olivia.
Yeah, this is a good career path.
Thank you for the water.
Absolutely.
All
Thank you
right.
for the water.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.